This week, Iceman is with us to talk about RFID hacking from the master himself. Let's see. In the security news, bats in your headset, Windows Wi-Fi driver vulnerabilities, Logitech's dongles, light HTTPD is heavy with vulnerabilities, Node IPs not vulnerability, new Intel CPU non-attacks, blast radius, Flipper Zero alternatives, aka Willy, OpenSSH, will it be exploited? Emergency Juniper patches, and the D-Link botnet keeps on growing. All that and more on this episode, Paul's Security Weekly. This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. It's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Breachlock is a global leader in continuous attack surface discovery and penetration testing. Since Breachlock was founded, they are adding over 50 new customers every month. They have discovered over 1 million reported vulnerabilities and performed more than 20,000 pen testing engagements, including pen tests for over 15,000 web applications, 8,000 mobile apps, more than 100,000 APIs, over 10,000 cloud security audits, and over 200,000 network endpoints. They test your entire attack surface and help you mitigate your next cyber breach before it occurs. Know your risk. Contact Breachlock today. Visit securityweekly.com/Breachlock. Coming to you from Purgatory Studios in semi-high definition compliments of Darth Vader himself, this is Paul's Security Weekly, episode number 834, being recorded on Wednesday, July 10th, 2024. Mr. Larry Pesce is here in studio.
Yeah, it feels like it's been forever since we've done this.
I know. And now we have fancy mute switches.
Yeah, watch this. Ready?
They're fancy. Yeah, Larry's talking right now and he can't even hear him. It's amazing.
Yeah, you wish you could hit that button all the time, don't you?
That's right. Yeah, now we could reach over and Larry can push my mute button.
I like to push your buttons.
That's right. Mr. Jeff Mann is here with us. Jeff, welcome.
If only the button had a 7-second delay built into it, then we'd be golden. I'm here
sometimes
out at my cabin, which is what I like to do when it's daylight. And even though it's 100 degrees, there's a wind chill factor. I don't know how that works in the summer, but it's actually very delightful out here, and I'm happy to be with you guys.
Yes, nice to have you. Mr. Bill Swearingen is here with us. Bill, welcome.
Come on, you got to read what the teleprompter says.
Yeah, I literally just saw it. What does the teleprompter say? What is my name today?
Okay, sorry, let me try that again.
And
here with us this evening is Butthole Bill Swearingen.
I do believe that someone else changed that. I did not put that in. So whoever you are, you need to fess up. But yeah, you can just call me Butthole today. That's fine.
That's what we call you anyway. So it's fitting.
Today.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Calling you that for 15 years.
Miss Mandy Logan is here with us. Mandy, welcome.
Why, thank you so much. I am really intrigued to find out about this OpenVPN kind of. Do you know the term tea? You know, like we're spilling the tea, the gossip.
Yes,
It's very much tea, I think, going on here.
No, I totally agree. It's black hat gossipy story.
Sure is. Yeah.
Quick announcement. You're invited to InfoSec World 2024 at Disney's Coronado Springs Resort in Lake Buena Vista. I feel like I read this on the other segment. I did. Okay, so never mind. The announcements take two. Maximize your investment at Black Hat 2024 with a one-on-one on-site interview. Drive thought leadership and boost brand awareness with Cyber Risk Alliance expert editorial team from Security Weekly and SC Media. Act now. Limited interview slots are available. Secure yours today at securityweekly.com/Black Hat 2024. All right.
You could state that those interviews are done with Jeff or I.
I could. I was just reading what was on the teleprompter, though.
Well, we can
that's what I do. That's what I do. I don't pretend to know who's doing the interviews. It's way above my pay
Well, the
grade
cat's
right now,
out of the bag now.
We'll pretend it's an SAO to that.
There you go.
Bill and me. And then it's Jeff and I.
You can go to securityweekly.com/PSW-834 to check out the show notes for this episode. as well. And we're going to dive into the stories for this week.
Yeah.
What do we got?
All sorts of
I like
stuff.
to turn it. Larry, why don't you pick?
Oh gosh, I was reading one of the stories here. How about where'd it go? Tell me about blast radius.
That is a vulnerability in Radius,
Is it a blast?
and it's a blast.
Next.
So you didn't read it either.
Well, just when you thought MD5 wasn't broken enough, they figured out how, and so they thought that it wasn't broken in the way that Radius was using MD5. Turns out it is broken in that way, in a way, I should say. But
In the
what
are you
story
saying
number is that?
in the
My number 18.
implementation? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
So what they say in the research paper is our attack identifies a protocol vulnerability in the way Radius uses MD5 that allows an attacker to inject a malicious protocol attribute that produces a hash collision between the server-generated response authenticator and the attacker's desired forged response packet. The attack is online. The attacker needs to be able to compute so-called chosen prefix MD5 hash collision attack in minutes or seconds. That was the other thing that changed. We can compute those much faster now.
Yep.
Previously, it took hours.
Do they go on to say what
So
the
since
malicious attribute is? Or
I'm sure they
or
do
is that
somewhere in the
the
paper.
secret sauce?
Yes. Obviously, Radius is still in use.
Yeah, like
Like-
radius train like this.
Oh,
is,
and Wi-Fi.
It's a train. It's so it's
Yeah.
used a whole bunch of places. Yep, can be used for Wi-Fi, for EAP types, for 802.1x
Right.
and authentication. Like you think 2G and 3G cellular roaming. Well, okay, whatever. But 5G data network name.
That's
Okay.
interesting.
SIM card based authentication for mobile Wi-Fi offload, private API authentication, and often within EduRoam and Open Roaming Wi-Fi consortia.
Yes, EduRoam uses Radius. It did
Uh-huh.
back in 2002 when I first heard of EduRoam.
And probably still does.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, that's still in use a lot of places. Oof.
But it's still kind of similar to SSH in that it requires somewhat of not technically a race condition, but you have to compute that hash fast enough.
Yep.
So I mean, this is kind of like the week of like, is this something we care about? Style vulnerabilities remains to be seen.
in the Q&A, hasn't MD5 been broken for 20 years? How is this attack new?
Right.
Great question.
Read the paper. Right.
Yeah, great question. All right. Is your attack practical? Yes and no. Great. What's
This
your
is a key. It's an interesting point that the Radius protocol predates modern cryptographic guarantees and is typically unencrypted and unauthenticated.
What the hell is a modern cryptographic guarantee?
That's a great question.
I don't know. That's why, like it predates
Anything
it
after
though.
MD5.
Yeah,
Guaranteed to fail.
Ice,
Guaranteed.
baby.
That's a weird statement.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Y'all talk about the
right,
news.
I need to
I'm
get
going
some-
to
I need to
Google the
get-
phrase and see where it came from.
Okay. You guys talk about something else while I get bourbon, because I totally forgot to get bourbon.
Oh, put the ice in your glass so I can put that back in the freezer first. Okay. Someone pick a story.
So, Larry, I liked your number one story. Bats can no longer haunt Apple VR headsets via the web exploit. So this one was pretty interesting to
This
me.
one's
So
batshit crazy.
that was, man, you've been working on that all day, haven't you?
I have. I have.
Yeah. So from what I understand, reading through it, they were, if you were to visit a malicious website with your Vision OS, so your Apple headset,
Yep.
they were able to fill your cache with animated objects without any kind of permission, and then using a bug, I guess. Maybe you know a little bit more, but basically it would fill your entire room with looks to be bats and spiders. It looks like,
or bats
Mhm.
or spiders or whatever object to choose, and it makes noise. The
that is.
bats one apparently screeches like, oh,
So
it's
I wonder,
hilarious.
was that like, so just looking into it, was that a flaw with, with the Safari browser? What was, was it like an exploit or just something just known? I'm not exactly sure.
I'm thinking it was a bug with what was referred to as the Apple AR quick look functionality. So it was like the preview type of thing, I'm guessing. The crazy part was, and Bill, for this one that I was reading about, that the quick look stuff that gets triggered by the page that has the content when you view it with your version of Safari on your Apple glasses there, it's a separate process.
Hmm.
So if you close your Safari browser,
Hmm.
your bats stay there because it's a
Oh.
completely different process that is processing all of those elements that
That's super cool.
oops.
So do any of you guys, are any of you guys VR people? Anybody have any headsets? Anybody interested in the?
I've got the MetaQuest version, one?
I've got the older one.
Yeah.
What was the older one? What was it before it was MetaQuest?
It was, yeah. I
It
remember.
was still Facebook, but it was
Yeah.
whatever it was before that.
Yeah. And of course, we haven't used it in like 2 years. And of course, like summer vacation, the youngest like
I
whips
kind
it
of
out and is like, I want a game for this. And I'm like, okay, great. Which game do you want? And not supported on our headset because it's
Oh.
too fucking old.
Oh.
kind of feel like it's similar to like Wii Golf or Wii Bowling. Like
Yep.
it's fun for a while and then it kind of loses its effect. And I think Guitar Hero had a similar kind of thing. And then like the headset, basically all the games on the headset kind of fell in that same category for
Yeah.
me.
Ooh,
Yeah,
ooh,
in my family.
ooh, ooh.
I mean, arguably, like Beats. I still think Beat Saber's a blast, and
No,
I'm
no,
not,
I
I'm
agree.
not very
Yeah.
good at it, and
Mm,
I haven't had time to even think about playing some of the
right.
different stuff.
I
But-
have an answer.
Ooh,
Oh,
yeah.
I actually, ironically, I found a white paper that actually starts to define the term, and it's written by somebody at Brown University. What a coinky
was it
dink!
Paul?
It wasn't Paul.
No.
No, it's some.
What
It's a
term?
PhD.
I didn't actually study at Brown University. I just
You
worked
worked
there,
there.
Bill. All right. Just
Well.
point of clarification here.
Clearly,
swept
hadn't studied
floors.
there.
Clearly.
Modern cryptographic guarantees rest on showing that it is computationally hard to distinguish between an encrypted 1 and an encrypted 0.
And who wrote the paper? Who was it?
Hold on. I got to zoom up to the top again. This was Sam Saarinen, PhD, Brown University, May 2021. Query strategies
Gotcha.
for directed graphical models and their application to adaptive testing. Ugh.
I think it's that heat getting to Jeff.
Is that what that was?
Man, it really zaps you, the heat.
I was going to say, like, he must have been generating his own hot air over there.
That very well could be. I haven't talked about PCI yet. I thought I had a PCI story too.
They're all
It's
PCI.
everything,
Paul. Come on
everything,
now.
all roads lead to PCI. You know that by now.
Right. I thought maybe I didn't add it. I don't know. I thought man. Anyway,
We'll find one.
Hey, back to Bill's question. Do you use VR headsets?
I
Are
don't.
you? No, okay, into butt health. Buttholes, he was asking, not Paul.
Yeah, so I had a real. That's funny. You
Oh,
call
you're
me
reversing the
butthole.
question back on
It's
Bill.
a
I
virtual,
see.
Right, yeah.
virtual
And
butt
for
butthole to you.
a
and she-
while, it was Dr. Bill.
Yeah,
Dr. Butthole.
Dr.
she
Butthole,
forgot
yeah.
my name because it just says butthole. So like I don't even know that guy's name.
Oh, open
Like,
parentheses.
Yeah,
O, lower parentheses, right parentheses, right? Yeah.
like, well, listen, I feel welcome back here. Like, someone is editing my lower third to just say butthole. That's awesome. I love you guys. Real similar experience.
Actually, wouldn't that be your lower turd?
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
So real similar experience. Kids had the what was it? Same one, like the first or second gen or whatever what was Meta's before, and it
Yeah.
kind of is gathering dust now. But when the Vision Pro came out, I it was pretty interesting. I saw a lot of the people I was working with really, really interested in getting it, but I don't know anybody that has got one. Like I just can't
Yeah.
imagine, like, I can see the working inside of it for an hour and having screens everywhere. I can see the benefit to that, but man, I just can't imagine having something, wearing that imagine 8 hours wearing that. That'd be rough.
Yeah, I think Tyler was doing some stuff like that, and he said he really liked it for like certain
Yeah, he was using
certain
like the
things.
he was like using the MetaQuest
Mhm.
and like did the virtual desktop screen and so forth. But yeah,
I think that could be interesting, and I really like it for a lot of therapeutic things, like with dementia patients or with even with behavioral health, mental health things. But I kind of steered away from it, especially after like the information that Kavya Perlman shared a few years ago about the vulnerabilities in VR and the way that, and kind of like what your story about the bats shows, is being able to hack in and really mess with people's psyche really fast. Like the bat
Yeah.
Yeah,
thing, I don't
how's
think it's that bad, but
Bill? How's the porn experience on it?
I untested. So what we should do is we should all get one for science and
Right,
report back.
and
Yeah.
report back.
Mm-hmm.
oh, so yeah,
This
and
is cybersecurity research right here.
Mm-hmm.
How safe or unsafe am I on the
cyber
internet if
sex
I
security
use the
research.
VR headset for porn?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's the stuff that I saw at CES that I reported back to everybody that ties to the virtual headset stuff.
Something you'll grow hair on your forehead.
Yeah, you'll grow hair on your eyelids. What?
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 I got the Jeff. I
You-
got the joke. I understood the joke. Yes.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mandy. You don't
The hairy
need to understand.
palms.
I don't, and I'm fine with this. I'm fine.
It's not funny if you have to explain it.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah.
We're gonna debate the 0-day term again with this OpenVPN story. It says they are refuting claims of a 0-day vulnerabilities
Oh, let's.
based on the Black Hat talk.
Mm-hmm.
So bring me up to speed on this. Are we saying that they're saying Microsoft is stating, or Microsoft researcher is stating, that he's going to release 4 vulnerabilities at Black Hat, and OpenVPN is saying that they don't exist? Am I reading that correctly?
Well, no, I think they're saying that they're not 0-day vulnerabilities because
Oh.
they are known and they have been patched, I believe.
Oh, okay. But they're just
Okay,
not known to the
yeah.
community.
So the vulnerabilities in question, CVE 2024-27903, blah blah blah, were responsibly disclosed to OpenVPN, and the patches were released in March 2024, well before the Black Hat announcement.
And I'd argue that probably because that researcher responsibly disclosed them.
At the
Yeah.
time he wrote the Black Hat submission, they might have been 0-day vulnerabilities,
Yep.
perhaps.
Well, and
And
I doubt that Microsoft would let him drop O-days at Black Hat, right?
Right.
Or would they?
Or would they? I mean, so that's definitely something that I'll be, that I would like to go watch, mainly around the process of discovery and, those kind of things. But, I really am starting to, and we kind of got into this last time I was on, but, it just seems like every single month we continue to see vulnerabilities in VPN software. Right. And, for as a security person, I've, and maybe I'm doing it wrong. And we kind of touched on this a little bit, but a lot of times I'll go into a customer's environment and they're using RDP open to the internet, or using like AnyDesk or whatever. And, I get rid of those products and implement a VPN. And now it just seems like the VPN software continues to get hit. Right.
Well, I
And
think that's the natural progression. Like, oh crap, RDP isn't open to, even SSH isn't open to the internet, but the VPN is.
yeah, so
Something has to be connected to the internet so we can connect to it, right?
yeah.
Well, is that true? I mean, because in Tailscale's place, if you have like a central, I forget what they call that, but like there's a server handling the connections, right? So you don't have to expose any ports to the internet. Because like I use Tailscale, like on and off. I'm like slowly configuring out for like all the stuff that I manage, and I'll give them a plug on the show. They're not a sponsor, but like the free account, like I'm like, do you sure you guys don't want money for that? Like seriously, because it's
I've
totally
never
useful. You
used.
get like five
I've,
users, 100, not 100, maybe not 100 devices, maybe 50 devices for free,
Hmm.
and
How does it?
it's
So I've
awesome.
never used it. How does it work?
So you have to create an account, and then you have to put the software on all the systems
Oh,
that
I see.
you want to use it on, and then
Mhm.
it connects back, and it basically puts them on their own network. So there's no exposed ports. Now you are putting
Yeah,
trust in Tailscale. Like
that's
if
right.
Tailscale gets owned, like everyone's owned kind of thing.
Mhm.
Depending on how bad they get owned. I mean, it could be that just my infrastructure gets exposed to the internet, which is why I'm like, oh, I'd configured a VPN. That means I can forget about security completely. That's not what it means. Like you still passwordless SSH authentication is awesome, right? Like you should. These are the things I think many of us do. And there's no, and there were some comments about last week about like no container should have vulnerabilities. Obviously, that was utopian world kind of speaking. Like I get
Right.
it. In the real world, we evaluate risk and we have a risk tolerance, and we only have so many resources. But in a lot of other situations, like VPNs and SSH, there's no like great excuse for those things to be exposed to the internet anymore, because we have technology at our disposal that lets us do a much better job of should be able to SSH into everything and not have to accept any password. So password brute forcing or guessing should be out of the picture. And they shouldn't have to expose those ports to the internet, because if you configure the VPN correctly, you shouldn't.
Mhm.
So I don't know.
In another real
But
world, you
go ahead, Jeff.
connect to the cloud and believe that every container you build is secure because it's on fill in the blank platform, and they said it would
Yeah.
be secure.
Well, and
Correct.
yeah, and it's actually a little bit more opaque of what it's even running in some cases, right? Like so. Yeah, those difficulties. But so going back to OpenVPN, I'm curious, like,
Yeah.
just, and you guys may
Oh,
have already
yeah.
discussed all this, but who's all going to Black Hat and DefCon this year? Like,
Me.
I'll be
nice,
there.
awesome,
I'm the
cool.
only one not going
Oh,
in the whole world.
And
in the
since you
whole
It's fine. It's
world,
But just
since you
canceled.
brought it,
B-sides.
well, yeah, their DefCon's canceled. Sky Talks is back, and
At
at
B-sides.
B-sides, and thanks
Yep.
to Mandy, I applied for it and got accepted. So I'll be
awesome.
speaking at Sky Talks. And DEF CON's got a weird new thing, because last year I went to the Crypto and Privacy Village, and I'm like, ooh, crypto. And I volunteered to help out since, I have a cryptanalytic background. I said I'd be happy to speak here. Because when I walked into the village last year, the person that was talking had a Visionaire square up on their screen, and they were talking about Visionaire tables and squares. I'm like, shoot, I could give that talk. And they were coming up with all sorts of weird ways to use it. So I'm like, I'd really like to give a talk. But apparently DEF CON now has something called Creator Stage, where what it sounds like is
Yep.
every village is submitting 2 or 3 people from their cadre of people that were going to talk, and it's going to be on a single stage and professionally recorded and so on and so forth. Somebody told me it was to try to alleviate the great disparity from village to village and whether they even have a place to present and AV support and stuff
Yep.
like that.
Yeah. So it sounds like each village was given so many
Slots.
hours of
Oh,
creator stage
congratulations.
to slots. And the only reason I know this is I am one of those
Well,
slots.
I am
for IT
too.
Village.
So I'll meet you on the creator
Cool.
stage, Larry.
Yeah. I get the lovely 10 a.m. on
Well, I
Saturday.
might. I mean,
I will not
So
meet you on the
I'm only
creator
familiar with it
stage,
because of
Larry.
Zooming, because of going over
But I'll
all
watch the
the
recording
schematics
later.
and everything that has to take place.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, so I have some big news. So DEF CON parties is an official part of DEF CON this year.
What?
So they made us official this year, and we are going to be goons as well, party goons. And so if anybody doesn't know, DEF CON parties is it's been an official.
Wait, hold on. I thought we weren't supposed to talk about DEF CON parties.
No, you can talk about it now. It's an official thing.
I thought it was like, but
Yeah.
before it was like Fight Club. Like it was kind of.
Now it's official. Yeah, it's
So-
official. Yeah.
So what do I got to do for a DEF CON party's black badge?
Oh my God, Larry!
Don't be
You
a
just-
don't be a butthole, Larry.
Right? Hey, listen, we all know what you have to do.
No, but wait,
Oh.
I want a DEF CON party black badge, not just to get me access to Black Hat. I want the DEF CON party black badge to get me into any
And
party that I
parties,
want to
You
go.
mean
yeah.
like
A
the random,
universal.
like the random
Listen.
I can get
quinceañera
in this
going
party
on
because
down
I
the
have
hallway?
got a DEF CON parties.
This
Like,
is
you know what? We should just create like
yep.
hold on, time out. Like we should
It's
just
true.
create one.
Yeah.
And then when we go to the parties, be like, I have a DEF CON parties black badge. You have to let me in.
This is
like,
br-
haven't
this
you
is-
read the
This is a brilliant
Perfect.
plan. I will
scan
take
this QR code? You can go read that
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be here.
Sounds
I will
like
take that. I will take that action, and I will deliver.
sounds
That
like
is a
every DEF
brilliant
CON party
idea.
badge should be a black badge. Is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, so we'll be in all the parties that are normally on defconparties.com are going to be in Hacker Tracker this year. And so hopefully I meet, come out and let's party. Hope to meet everybody.
What is DEF CON? What is DEF CON party? It's just a tracker for all the parties happening. It's not
Yeah.
an actual party. It's just a tracker for everyone else's parties.
Right. So
Because you guys are too cheap to put on a party yourself.
yep. And yep. Yes. And so
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm in the same boat. I'm
It's
right there with
DEF
you.
CON
man.
Party
I'm right there with you.
So not-
Crashers.com.
Yeah. So
Mm.
not only too cheap, we're not willing to put in the work, right? So it's both of those things: too cheap and not willing to put in the
Yeah.
work. Yeah.
Cheap
Lazy.
and lazy. I got you.
So
That's
going
right,
back
yeah.
to OpenVPN real quick, the
Oh,
issue
gave me
was that it's not there. So their main thing was that these don't qualify as 0 days, but they are still serious vulnerabilities. Okay.
Correct.
So this is the irony, Paul. You pulled up the thing from Black Hat and the talk title and submission and all the
I
description.
had that.
on Black Hat.
I'm doing this new thing where I'm using the gigantic 65-inch monitor that's in
Wow.
front of us.
It's very
We actually have two of
CSI
them.
of you.
You all are on one, and now I've got the
In
the show notes up on
2008.
the other one.
In 2008.
So,
but yeah, that's very
Yes,
CSI
yeah.
of you.
When you brought that up,
Larry and I are old. We need a really big monitor. Okay. That's not the right one.
The talk description was, hey, we're going to go and walk through the process of how we found these 4 0 days in OpenVPN. Because you brought up the talk description on Black Hat's website.
I'm trying to find that.
And now they're saying
I have it.
Now they're saying they're not 0 days. Well, yeah, because the talk is saying that they're not 0 days anymore because they have been patched. But the talk is about how
Yeah.
they
To
went
find-
and discovered us.
Isn't every vulnerability a 0 day until you disclose it and it gets fixed?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Mhm.
This session will explore the technical
I
intricacies
know
of our research,
17
revealing how we
0 days
uncovered
right
these 0
now.
days in OpenVPN.
I just haven't discovered them yet, but I know they're out there.
Right.
Hey, when you do, can you just tell me real quick? I mean, whatever. Yeah, I'll keep it on the low.
Yep.
3 of them are
Yeah, well, I
WordPress.
completely agree.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's funny.
What do we want to talk about now? What do we want?
Paul,
Let's talk about the
I
Willy.
think your PCI story might have been your story number 11, Supreme Court decision about something about
This
regulation.
one I couldn't figure out why this was such a big deal. And when I read this, I said we really need to bring an attorney on to help us understand
Mhm.
that unless someone has read it and or talked to an attorney about like what it means. But I couldn't quite figure out why there was such a big deal. It's something about how there's federal laws and then there's rules and regulations enforced by various bodies or agencies within the government. And there was something about the appeal process. Like if you violated SEC rulings, you could appeal in court, but now you can't. You have to appeal back to SEC or the other way around. I forget.
Well,
This
it's
is
not
in-
PCI
so the
related
court may now
because it
simply
all had to
invalid-
do, from what I read, about dealing with federal regulation and federal agencies, which it could be PCI related, but it sounded like my brief read, it was opening the door for agencies that had had issues and findings and perhaps fines and negative reinforcement to push back and get off the hook. That's the way I read it. But all
Yeah, so there's a says cutting to the chase, if a business appeals an agency decision. So like if the
Mhm.
if the SEC were to impose a fine on on a business, the courts no longer needed to defer to the agency's decision on or opinion on the matter. So essentially, that what this changes is for you to appeal an agency conclusion and taking it into the court. And what it basically says is this is going to lead just to
More litigation.
More litigation. So in
Right.
well-funded companies, a bunch of lawyers, bunch of paperwork,
Mhm.
bunch of, so that's
Yeah,
what it's
yeah.
saying here.
I got
So
you.
it opened the door for appeals, whereas in the past
For appeals,
you couldn't
correct.
really appeal, or the courts wouldn't entertain
Unless
it.
that agency had an appeal
Right.
process.
Okay.
Mhm.
More or less not PCI related, and that's the only thing that I saw in your stories that was remotely close
Gotcha.
to PCI.
I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about Flipper Zero alternatives. We talk a little bit about the Flipper Zero in our interview with Iceman's coming up next, which
Yep.
was pre-recorded and just absolutely amazing. He's so funny. We just had the best time. It was awesome.
Stupid
And,
question,
I didn't
Paul,
spend a
but
lot
a
of
week
time.
from now when these
Yeah.
things are out, is it still going to be the second segment, or?
Yes,
All right, I was just curious.
correct. So I did see this. I know, Mandy, you put this in Slack that based on a LilyGo S3, they built a Flipper Zero alternative with a screen and sub-gigahertz infrared, Bluetooth Low Energy, and Wi-Fi, which you could totally do. In fact, I knew someone that was definitely eyeing the LilyGo hardware to make a Flipper Zero alternative.
Yep.
I think those were most kind of turning them like,
Well, they're
oh,
sold
that
out.
totally makes sense.
They've been completely sold out.
But I
you
don't think, can you
still
buy
have
these?
in
Or are they sold
28
out?
in
Sold
stock
out.
of the firmware
Oh,
itself. Right? But it used to be free.
That's just weird.
dude, you have to
Kind
buy
of
the firmware.
makes you miss Radio Shack, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah,
the
but I
device
think
and
they
the
were trying to
Shield,
prevent shenanigans. So
those
they're
have
like,
sold out. I
you
think they
gotta
only
buy
had
the firmware.
200. Willie.
What's the name of this device?
It's called the Willy.
Oh, the Willy.
No, I think the device
Willy
is like 120
firmware
euros.
Is it free?
I want to say.
dot
Yeah. It is not a free Willy, but
firmware.com.
So it's not
and the
it's not a free
firmware
Willy.
version 2 is 35 euros right now.
It is
There's
not a free Willy, no.
27 in stock. It's locked with a license.
Oh, why? Larry's playing footsies with me, but
Well, you put the subwoofer in front of me, and I gotta go put my feet up
I
on
know,
it, but your feet
I
are already
know.
there. So
I mean, this kind of
like, I
goes back.
wonder-
This
I'll
kind of
take this
goes back.
corner.
Go ahead,
Take the
Bill.
other corner.
Sorry. What I was going to say is this kind of goes back to why we've been so vocal about the Flipper being banned in Canada and everyone worry. Why is everybody so worried about the Flipper when you can just buy it off of? You can build it with components you can get pretty much any. You can
Yes.
get off Amazon.
So you can build
right?
it. You can order all of the parts from AliExpress and LilyGo.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yes.
And solder them. The soldering doesn't look horrible from what I've seen so far.
There's probably not even any soldering. These things probably plug in.
No,
Is
it
there?
looks like the LEDs and all that. It looks like there's a bunch of through hole soldering, which is entry level. You're totally doable.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Yeah. So I know I just want to build one. Then you got to pay for
Well,
the firmware.
why
but
do you need to build one? Build two.
build two?
Like if you're gonna get the soldering iron
You might
out,
as well,
Right.
do an assembly
you
line.
might as well do like 30 of them.
Where
I don't know what the total
seeing,
cost of that.
Where are you seeing the build photos to see this through hole soldering spots?
I just
On
put it
their
in
GitHub
Slack.
page.
github.com/lowercase h-rat, RAT, all caps.
Oh. And then there's a link to this build. Yeah.
See it.
Because, like, we already have two Flipper Zeros each, and then we need another Flipper Zero alternative.
Yep.
On top of another Flipper Zero alternative. So I turned my card pewter from M5
M5 stack stuff.
M5 stack stuff
Oh, from
So you got a couple of these card computers, and there's a firmware called
Bruce.
Bruce. What? Yeah,
Fish
we got
are friends, not food.
Flipper, Willie, Bruce. We're noticing a theme here, and Bruce is super cool. So I just got the firmware on my card computer today, and it supports Wi-Fi, Bluetooth Low Energy, including a bunch of attacks, RF jamming. FCC, close your ears.
I mean, it supports
RFID.
it. You know,
It supports it. I'm not
you would
saying we're going to
never.
act right.
Yeah.
I can have the capability. I just can't use it.
Yeah.
TV be gone. All kinds of stuff.
Hypothetically, of course, if you take one of your Flipper Zeros and hold it close to one of your chip credit cards, does it do anything?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it doesn't do anything unless you press buttons, but there are
So-
things that you could do with your EMV card. Absolutely.
Well, you can read the number,
Mhm.
the card number, which if you're holding the card, you can also read the card number. Just
Well,
putting that out there.
Not necessarily. Newer cards don't have the numbers printed on them anymore. I've seen cards that do
That's
not have the
inconvenient.
pan.
Well, some have them
they
as
stopped
printed on the
embossing
back,
them,
right?
which is
There's
the
no
raised
embossing. But you mean they're
numbers,
completely
Paul. Yep.
devoid of the number?
Yeah.
Some, but I have seen cards that are completely blank, and they're actually.
How do I use it online then? How do I type it
That's a
in?
good question.
There's a sticky note inside your wallet with your credit card number written on it.
Oh, got it. No, all right, wrote it on the back with Sharpie, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Probably you,
So
you
what is
hold it close to your
anyone's-
phone,
oh.
and one of your wallets picks up the data. But yeah, I mean the chip data. I'm sorry, the chip data that you can read using one of these devices. It's the equivalent of if you had a mag stripe reader. You know, it's not encrypted, it's not protected, it's all there. You just have to have the right equipment to be able to read
Right.
it.
Except you will not get a the CVV2. You'll get a CVC and a transaction counter, which is tied to that CVC, if I recall.
Something like that. And that's only one card brand, because the other card brands have a different name for it.
Yep.
Because they all play together nicely.
Yeah, what is the Megalodon attack?
Oh God, turn safe search.
Attack? Well, I can't even search for Megalodon attack because that's not gonna. I'm on the wrong keyboard anyway.
Yeah, you're gonna get wrong.
Is it a Wi-Fi, Bluetooth? What is the Flipper? Is it a Flipper thing?
Whose story
idea.
is it?
Flipper Zero.
Flipper Zero, maybe? No, we're trying to go through the attacks that this. Yeah, I don't know.
Looks like what was it? Capture and replay for top one.
Flipper Zero linear.
Sub-gigahertz replay, maybe?
No. I'm not even sure. They just list the attacks with no links to like what they are.
I never knew that both of you moved your lips when you were reading silently.
Sometimes.
Yep. Sometimes it's not my lips that are moved. Never mind.
It's not in their documentation either. Anyway, I've been playing around with it. You should check it out. It's pretty cool. And these card computers from M5 Stack are like $30. And the add-on modules that enable RFID and sub-gigahertz are like $4 each.
What do
or
they
something
look like?
that.
What do the add-on modules look like? Kind of like the Flipper?
Yeah, no, I don't have them here. They do not look like a Flipper. They're like a small rectangular
cool.
kind of shaped thing.
Cool.
Yep.
The picture I put in Slack had so we're trying to figure this out. Like on the back of this, so on the back of the card computer is this thing that's held in by two screws. This is actually the battery that powers it. And these things are Lego bricks. And I was like, what does that mean? And like actually compatible with Legos is what it means, which is kind of cool. But I haven't looked into, like, someone had a bunch of the add-on modules connected to like a Lego brick on the back of it. And then other people had an antenna on it. And I'm like, well, where's the module to get an antenna on this thing? It turns out they don't make one, but you can modify this, drilling holes and epoxy and all that stuff, and put in RPSMA or whatever connector on it.
With epoxy, you can put an antenna on anything.
Anything, right? Slap an antenna on it.
little epoxy and some JB welds.
This one actually connected to the antenna ports on the inside, and it was
Maybe.
functional, but
maybe
maybe
as far as
not.
you
It
know,
could just
yeah.
be for looks, right?
Yeah.
I'm just going to slap an antenna on it, so
Yep.
it looks cool. When I'm carrying around at DEF CON, everyone thinks I'm cool
That's
because I have an antenna.
little JB weld and some deck screws, and you're good to go. And drywall screws.
Can you slap it onto a Pringles can for old
Yeah.
times?
No, my immediate imagining
on the metal
was
bottom,
Bill,
yeah, because this has a magnet on it. Like,
Okay.
it has
yeah,
a mag-
that's cool.
it's
okay.
not strong enough to. Oh no, it is. Yeah, see, it has a magnet on it.
What were you gonna say, Mandy?
I don't
I
know
see,
why.
my first
but
thought
it
was
does.
Bill Butthole walking around with an egg burrito epoxied with an antenna slapped on it.
Perfect. Listen, with an egg burrito, you don't even need epoxy. You can just jam that shit through.
I'm thinking,
Yeah.
if it's powdered eggs, a little bit dried out, you just smack it.
They're like, Bill, why does your burrito have an antenna? He's like, what do you mean yours doesn't?
And
I'm
DEF
not
CON.
sure
I
about
wouldn't
that.
too.
It's DEF CON, baby.
Just don't forget to put the googly eyes on the burrito.
Mhm.
Right.
And
But you have to eat around it, and then you just have to drop the googly eyes with the egg encrusted like on the ground.
So this
Don't
also says it has a TV Be Gone on it, which is interesting.
So it has
You need an add-on for
IR.
that?
It already.
I
Does
think
it
this
already have
has. Yes.
Huh.
I can't see. Oh, it says running. Let's see if the TV's turned off. All right, carry on. We'll see if the TV's turned off.
Mandy
You just lost Mandy.
It's a really good IR. Got me all the way to Mandy's house.
You have no idea my hacking skills, Mandy, okay?
Wow.
Oh my God. If the lights turned off in here, I'd be wicked impressed. Because the spotlights in here actually have infrared.
All I know is the
transceivers
one
on them.
behind you is pulsing right now.
Oh no, they are. They are pulsing. Do you see that?
Mhm.
Just as I was saying, they have infrared. Because you set one as the master, and then you set all the rest as slave. And I know that's not PC terminology, but that's like literally what they call it in the documentation.
Yep.
But so the first one, if I turn that one on and off, all the other lights go on and off. Okay, but how do I stop this now? No, I can't stop it. Okay, talk about
I think
something else.
the episode is
Pausing.
about to
Glad it's-
end, I think.
I'm glad it's not flashing any faster because I make a seizure. Oh, it's still flashing, but so did you stop that thing?
I did. I just turned it off.
Oh, it's probably buffering. Oh,
All right.
boy.
Anyway, that was fun.
I just spent too much time actually staring at one of those spotlights.
And then Mandy dropped. Did you see that?
Yep,
Mhm.
you
Wow.
did it again.
Wow.
Buffering.
My hacking skills are just out of this world, right?
So speaking of crazy hacking skills, how about that dude that took down North Korea's internet? How about that for a
Again, I thought this
So
is
it's-
like a trend. This right?
Yeah, so it's
Is this
Larry's
recent?
number 6. Like, have you guys already
Yeah,
talked
so-
about this?
we probably did, and I'm just.
But I think
now
this happens all the time.
Well,
Mm.
the story came out, and I saw it about 3 weeks ago.
Mhm.
When was the last time I was on the show? And I'm now noticing that the story was actually from April 4th. So a lot earlier, not all that earlier this year. We may have already talked about it.
No, I think we talked about it years ago, but maybe.
Oh no, this one is a new one, or at least a new deal.
Yeah, from what I remember, and I saw it same as you, Larry, a couple 3 weeks ago, seems about right. And I guess he unmasked himself on Twitter, and then really spilled the tea, as Mandy would say, on how he did it, all via like a Twitter thread, right? It's or X or whatever
say
it's called,
Twitter.
Twitter. Yeah. But I'm reading through the Wired article, and I can't recall exactly how he did it, so that was bad on me. Sorry, listeners. But from what I recall, it wasn't. I mean, good on him or bad on him, whatever. But it didn't seem like it was necessarily too. Oh yeah, I do recall now. He found the exit node of North Korea, and he DDoSed it.
Mhm.
Is how he took down North Korea's internet. And
So wait, all of North Korea's internet goes through a Tor exit node?
So I don't think it was necessarily Tor, but there was,
Okay.
a
Like a
choke.
router?
Yeah, like there was a choke point, like a router or something. So an internet point of presence, let's just say. And he DDoSed. So I think he rented a bunch of AWS servers or something like that, and then DDoSed that IP address. And now he has a Wired article about his hacking skills. So
I'm not seeing that there was just any denial of service stuff going on there, but I could be wrong. It's a traditional Wired article. It's relatively lengthy and kind of light on technical details, but
yeah, so I think the better place to read this was on his Twitter account, and I don't have it in front of me right now. But realistically, I think that the better story inside of this story is if you're going to publicly announce that it was you that took down North Korea. Are you worried for your life, and should you be taking, like, was that a huge OPSEC fail on his part, or did he just want the fame? What, like,
I think probably only if he goes to North Korea.
likely.
so you think
unlikely.
North Korea's reach is only in North Korea?
For that,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
for
so
them to expend resources on that, like, let's go get the person that took down our internet. Screw that guy.
yes,
Wait, but this says
yep. So yes, with the
but it
there was
sounds
a,
like he
a
was retaliating.
run of North
in-
Korea attacking
right? So
security
he was
researchers
retaliating
in
against
an
North
attempt to steal
Korea
all of their
attacking him
hacking
in
tools.
2021.
Right.
And
That I would be more concerned about because,
Yeah.
when that movie came out, they hacked Sony.
Yep.
So,
and Kasari's the guy that took down North Korea downloaded these tools and sandboxed them and found it hit a backdoor and so forth, and then was kind of pissed off. So after nursing his grudge for a full year, he decided to take matters in his own hands. In late 2022, January 2022, he began running custom hacking scripts designed to target a few key North Korean routers responsible for internet traffic in and out of the country.
I like
Checking
how
to-
he stewed on it for a year,
Yeah,
though.
checking to see whether they
like
were
a year
online or
later,
not.
he was like, you know what? Screw those people.
And
I'm taking out their internet.
Yep. And to Bill's point, checking to see whether those routers were online, and if they were, amplifying his waves
Well,
of
he did
malicious
go to
data
the
requests to
FBI.
cause them
I
to
mean,
crash.
he did go to the
otherwise known as a
FBI.
denial of service attack, Bill. Butthole. So
I
think,
hate how after
there
this
were-
episode, if somebody says butthole, I'll be like, yeah, what's up, man? Like, like that. It's going to be like, it's just going to be something that I respond to now. Like, hey,
I
what's
feel
up?
like it
Also,
should be on the
uh,
back
I-
of your goon shirt.
Yeah. Yeah, it's butthole.
Also, I
Oh, wait, this means-
I think we should make a rule that no playing.
No, I was
going
going
to
say, if you're
hacking
now
toys while
technically
we're
a goon,
on
then
the
at some
air,
point you'll get a
'cause
goon
the lights
patch.
are still
It's just
pulsing.
butthole. That's all it's gonna be.
yeah,
Oops.
Sean would have appreciated that months ago when his keyboard stopped working while he's trying to produce
Now we're
a
just
show.
hacking ourselves. Like, we literally just hacked ourselves. It's great.
Yep.
And
That
we
w-
made Mandy drop.
That was like what was it? What was it years ago when we were like interviewing someone?
No,
when we
yeah.
were still do podcasting.
You just
out of
kicked
your
me
basement
out. That's all. No big
in
deal.
your little office,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I was playing with Ettercap, and I'm like, hey, look at this. Paul's not going to be able to load some page from something or other that he's trying to
Oh, yeah.
do on the show.
Turns
and I
out
took-
no
took-
one could load any
I took-
pages.
I took down Paul's whole home internet, and not even the guest who was coming in remotely could do anything. Oops.
Well,
Yeah.
what else are you
That's-
supposed to do with
you
the
know.
taser? Like,
That's really giving that whole thing of when you're hanging out with an idiot friend that's
You're supposed
holding
to
a
let
taser
Trent
and they
hold
tase
it.
themselves.
yeah. Listen, I tell you what, one of the like a fun thing is you go buy like one of those $10 little, not like the shoot 'em out dart tasers, but the $10 little taser things, and just throw it out to a bunch of friends.
Oh,
That-
yeah. See, you live in a state that actually has freedom.
Oh
So,
yeah, I do live in a freedom state for sure. Why, you can't have those there?
we live in a non-freedom state. We can't own any of that stuff.
Yep. Oh, I mean, you can, but you have to have a license for it.
No,
What?
I
I
don't
think the
I
rules
don't
would
think they allow
change,
it at
Paul,
all.
if you would simply move out of state. It wouldn't benefit you.
Well, I think if Larry and I were to post funny videos about us tasing each other, they'd be like, "Oh, you know what? We totally need to allow that because it's so hilarious."
But even better, they need to tie the taser to a yeah breathalyzer.
Right.
Breathalyzer.
Well, you've been looking for ideas for technical segments, Paul. So there you go.
Right. We also are not allowed to order pellet guns or air rifles over the internet,
What?
but we can totally buy crossbows,
Mm.
which are really awesome, and spears. I bought a spear off of Amazon. Best purchase ever.
And you loaded it into your pellet
Like,
gun. and
how
it was
have I
awesome.
not owned a spear before this? I mean, this thing is awesome. It's awesome.
Like a spear fish, like a spear gun?
No, like it's a staff with a knife on the end. And it's carbon fiber and like weighted so you can throw it. It's awesome. It's the best Amazon purchase ever. It's a spear. Because I was like, well, if animals get in the backyard and try to attack my dogs because the laws are around, and I can't own anything cool to deal with that problem, except I'm like, I was like, go out there with a knife. I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to be that close to it because then it's going to attack me. I'm like, what I need is like a knife on a stick. I'm like, oh, that's a spear. I'm like, Amazon spear. This is beautiful. It's beautiful.
Well, now you're on some list somewhere because
now I am definitely on multiple lists for multiple things.
Yeah, that's not good.
So in Kansas, you don't even need to have a license to conceal carry a firearm. You just
right.
It's go ahead or open carry or anything. Yeah.
Firearms laws just keep getting more and more.
Larry, you might have to slide your chair over and sit near Paul.
Yeah, like my laptop is also not charging.
Yes, Mandy's back and Larry's gone. Way to go, Paul.
This is just like a hang out with us news segment. This is just like if we were just to hang out, that's what you're just hanging out with us listeners right now. I hope you enjoy just the hangout time with us.
Hey, well, as long as we're hanging out, I should mention that I'm getting ready to head up to New York for Hope Conference, Hope 15. Anybody going to Hope? Anybody been to Hope in the past? This will be my first time.
I have not.
I've never been.
Well,
you're speaking at Hope, right?
I'm speaking at Hope. Yep. And I'm kind of excited. Bia is going to be there. I haven't seen Bia since, she was our last interview before we shut things down for COVID back in 2020. You remember that? She was in studio. I think that's the last time I've seen her. And I'm sure I'll see other people.
Well, let's talk about more non-vulnerabilities. What do you say? Do you guys think guys and gals, do you think the OpenSSH remote code vulnerability, should we sound the alarm about this one? Is this like a hurry up, patch it, world is ending? Or no?
What's the CVSS score?
I think roughly a 7 out of 10, isn't it?
I think it's a 7 out of 10.
Was it like 7.3 is the most?
Mandy just scored it right in her brain. It's like, you know what?
Is it?
Anytime.
That was just my take, but sure.
Anytime I need a CVSS score and a vulnerability, I'm like, Mandy,
give me a number, Mandy.
She's like 7.3.
It's a 7 out of 10.
Now, is it? Are you talking CVSS version 2, 3, or 4? This is kind of like the reference
earlier with Iceman about the osmosis.
It's only gotten a 3.x score.
It's
so
just,
version 3 is 8.1.
Well, so what would be the argument to hurry up and patch, Paul?
So my argument for hurry up and patch is if you've got an IoT device, embedded system, or appliance that is running OpenSSH and it's vulnerable, my advice is like patch now, like treat that with a higher priority, because oftentimes on those devices and appliances that are specially purpose built, right? They sometimes don't give you a lot of configuration for OpenSSH. So you can somewhat mitigate this vulnerability through configuration and monitoring. I think monitoring for failed login attempts is certainly one way. But also like the way this vulnerability works, that you have to send so many requests. It's like 10,000, right? Somewhere like on average it's 10,000. So you could get it on the first one, or it could be on the 15,000th request, or somewhere in between. average 10,000, those devices have very typically poor monitoring.
Mhm.
So if I'm an attacker, I'm like, all right, what do you got exposed in your network that's got OpenSSH that's like some kind of appliance that you're relying on? That's what I'm going to go after. So I'm going to fly under the radar and fly under the radar with my OpenSSH, right? That's what I'm going to do. I just want to say this is the most fun podcast segment I've done today and probably in a long time. Okay. I don't know what else is going to happen, but we're on the top of the second hour, and I'm just like really excited about what's ahead of us for the next
Oh my
57 minutes. Okay.
Larry's back.
God.
I'm back. And you note there's a significant difference between Bill's butthole and my butthole.
That's
I agree.
Well,
I'll take your word for it.
isn't it like a fingerprint? Didn't we cover a story that it's like a fingerprint? I think we covered a story.
No, so
about
Bill's is an O and mine's a Chester's.
it.
I can't see your butthole, Larry.
Um,
Larry, I can't see your butthole. Like,
in retrospect, it was a really crappy
Right?
story.
There you go, Bill.
I
See, now
feel-
you can see it.
Larry's
Oh,
is
there we
more
go. I see it
classic.
now,
Larry's
yeah.
a little bit more classic.
Well, if we're going to try to
Because
continue
it
with
was
it,
loud.
Paul,
It's very crappy.
For those here to like learn how you should prioritize the OpenSSH vulnerability, you're shit out of luck. I'm just saying.
Because
For those
literally
only-
Bill and I are
Oh
talking
man,
about our
nobody
buttholes.
sees what we
You
see.
should go listen to another podcast
I just
for that, not this one.
right. Yeah.
No.
You are, but
Mhm.
even those watching won't actually see what we're referring to. They don't understand. So for those who are
But
either
names
blind,
is like
or
air
who are
quotes
not seeing
names.
this,
Name
for
is
those of us who are
a text
on
field.
the
The
recording
user
side,
has
we see the
100%
names
control
of
over
our
what
co-hosts.
value goes in there, and that is a dangerous thing to give to hackers. Just
Yes.
throwing that out there.
Well, and just to be clear, I do not
Mhm.
have 100% control of mine because mine was changed. Like, let's make sure.
Someone else
Yes,
changed it.
someone else
Hmm.
changed it.
Hmm.
Yes. Or-
Several times.
Why do you have to throw the firm in there?
And currently, his tag that we see is butthole in large, very firm letters. But then there is a parentheses, a small. You are the firmware king. Like, should that be a matter? No, that should not be a problem to use the word firm
Oh, I
in
see.
in describing his font.
Larry wants to be a
Now,
lot more
Larry's
accurate
says
in his
not
description.
butthole, but he
I
has
see.
a parentheses, an
Yeah.
asterisk, and a
Well,
parentheses.
Oh, that-
I want
was
to.
of
I
my
want to
own doing when I
claim.
rejoined.
Claim taint.
No, whoever is naming us is.
Sorry, Paul. You lost control.
I did. I
Yeah,
like
yeah.
completely
Was it?
lost control of this show. I have no idea what we've been talking about for the past hour. I just
think-
hope
I think we were talking about SSH. I think.
Open.
we
open
position the
SSH.
show as entertaining
Okay.
and informative. I hope it's been entertaining because certainly the informative part.
I
Right.
did have a
This-
serious question though
Oh.
about your open
Yeah,
secure
54 minutes. Let's try and be a little more informative, but equally as entertaining. Okay, that's the challenge I'm throwing
It's
down.
not very
shell. So Paul,
informative.
you'll remember back
Okay, Dan.
how many years ago when we were at Tenable,
Let's get in.
2013, 14, where SSL came out as being, somebody finally discovered an attack against it where they would cause a collision, which made NIST say, okay, everybody's got to get off SSL and early TLS. And PCI had just brought out their version 3 of the standard, which allowed SSL. And then they put out version 3.1 that said, okay, you can't use SSL. But it turns out a lot of vendors were using SSL in their technology, like point of sale equipment and card readers, things like that. So they had to come out with a 3.2 that said, okay, we'll allow it under certain circumstances. And I remember having arguments with Renault about, well, just how bad is it? Because, what has to be done to actually exploit this attack? And I don't remember what the CVSS score was on it. Somebody could
Sure.
look it up.
But this week is filled with exactly what you're describing.
Right. Well,
Jeff.
that's why I'm bringing it
so-
up. Compare and
Yeah.
contrast.
And in the SSH vulnerability, right? It's going to live in these appliances for a long time because it's going to be part of the supply
Right.
chain in the firmware of these devices. I think the light HTTPD vulnerability is the same spiel, right? Although that one's kind of weird in how it played out. Like OpenSSH was clear vulnerability, got a CVE, and then there was another one that came after that. There's actually a second one with a lower score. It's a little more difficult to exploit, but also light HTTPD is used in a lot of embedded systems, appliances, IoT devices as well. And there was numerous vulnerabilities. It didn't get a CVE, and then the CVE it did get was had 2018 25103 to identify this vulnerability and alert supply chain partners to implement the required fix. And this one thing that really pisses me off lately is look, if there's a vulnerability in a piece of software that ties back to a version of that software, it should get a CVE so we can track it. Because if we can't track it, to most organizations, that vulnerability doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in their world. But in the attacker's world, it most certainly exists, right? I mean, go back to
So what I hear you saying,
when you
Paul,
had folders for
is older software, older things. Nobody's monitoring them. Nobody's looking at any discussion of them.
That is
And of
now
course, we're
Bill's
back to
daddy.
talking about the companies that are only going to respond to scan findings, right? And are all these devices in question even being scanned?
Well, by somebody, right?
Well,
That's the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't pretend to know how often scanning happens today in enterprises and what that process looks like. It'd be an interesting study to do and be like, okay, here we are, thinking that vulnerability management was kind of like yesterday's news. It's table stakes. It's not exciting. We were having this discussion with Wade and Jay from the Essentia Institute on the Below the Surface podcast. We thought vulnerability management wasn't exciting. And Wade's like, look, we embarked on this study to do EPSS, the exploit prediction scoring system. He's like, I thought it was kind of just going to be boring, but turns out it's totally not boring. People still struggle with, I think, scanning, not just my observation, and also struggle with prioritization for remediation.
Now, when you say struggle with scanning, what do you mean by that? What's the struggle?
Do you think today, given the breaches that have happened recently with VPN appliances, as an example, right? Do you think that every organization out there is scanning external from the internet facing in on a regular basis and taking action on the results?
No.
My inclination is no, because of a lot of the breaches that we've seen where this outdated appliance or whatever was used as part of the breach.
Yeah.
Well,
or they are doing it and they're not acting on the results, or they are doing it and they're not prioritizing it correctly. And I think in all those cases, this is stuff that is totally fixable, right? I mean, there's some politics at play. It's not strictly a technical issue, but I think these things are fixable.
Paul, in the PCI world,
as a crystal ball.
If you're an entity that has to do PCI, you have to do external scans by an approved scanning vendor, ASV. But a lot of those companies go to great lengths to limit the scan to only things that are associated with their
That's exactly right.
e-commerce platforms. Where I've been trying to tell these customers for years, and it was open to debate in the early days. Well, what should we be scanning? And I'm like, everything, anything internet facing, anything internet addressable should be part of the scan, because anything is a possible attack vector that could ultimately get to your e-commerce environment or internally. But there's a lot of companies that go to great lengths to try to limit those external scans, and if you're not required to do it by some compliance or regulatory standard, I don't know that many are doing it or doing it often enough or targeting everything.
Well, we've all seen the output from a vuln scanner,
Mhm.
right? Like, and so yeah, I think so. Jeff, you're exactly right. Like, yeah, I think that
That's taint,
if you
to
have
not
to,
Jeff.
oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, Mr. Taint Man.
There you go.
You're welcome. But like so obviously, if I'm going to scan everything and then I get back a report that has 400,000 issues, right?
Right.
So I've got to start somewhere, right? So I completely agree with you. First of all, I'm just kind of devil's advocate here a little bit. If if you're going to want to be PCI compliant, you need to scope down as absolutely as much as you can, right? Like,
I
so
want to throw this out there though. PCI aside, if you're looking at a scan report from your environment and you see a CVE moniker with the date of 2018,
Yeah.
let's just say on some kind of appliance, like the first thing that goes through my mind is that's got to be a false positive, or
oh,
that's got to be low severity, or like if it was high severity and I haven't been popped by now in the past 6 years,
that's interesting.
like
Yeah,
then why I'm not really worried about it. The problem with this light HTTPD thing
yeah,
is they issued a 2018 moniker CVE number for something that the NVD published on June 17th, 2024.
Yep.
yeah. That's an interesting
This is
take.
one of my nitpicky things that I have
This isn't
with
nitpicky, dude.
CVE.
This is
No,
like
you're right. This
this
is
is
a
bull.
huge issue. Like, stop. I understand you may have a bank of CVEs, but like go get new ones for this year. Like, there needs to be a better
No,
process
if you
for
are
that.
publishing it this year, it needs a this year.
It was
100%.
discovered. It was disclosed this year, discovered this year, and recognized and acknowledged this year. Why does it have a 2018 CVE?
Mm-hmm.
Because then it throws the age thing out of the window. If you're going to analyze all the vulnerabilities in your environment, and let's just say I want to sort by year, and I want to look at the oldest ones first of a certain severity and go, maybe I should probably clean some of those up, because if they're hanging out there for a really long time, attackers have more time to develop exploits. Yada yada yada. Maybe we got older software out there that needs to be up. Maybe I can kill a bunch of those by just going to the latest version on something, and I can wipe out a few thousand, findings in my report. It throws all that out the window.
Yeah. Well, and so like you have a really interesting take on year. So the way I look at year is I look for years to identify failed patching processes, right? So
Right.
if I look at a report and I see 2018 in there, like, hey, we've got a problem. I don't really care too much about this host, but we've got something that's failing in that process because it hasn't been touched in 6 years, right? Like that, something's failing there, right?
Yep.
That's a problem.
But not in this case, because it
Right.
didn't get published until like a month ago.
Right.
Right. So the problem is
The-
2
and-
years
and-
ago, this wouldn't have been a scan finding. 1 year ago, this wouldn't have been a scan finding. All of a sudden, it's popping
Right.
up as a scan finding, and it looks like it's 6 years old.
Yeah.
The one that also kind of cheeses me about this one, Paul, if you scroll up a little bit here.
Oh, I was going to the git commit that fixed it to see what date it had on that. Is there a date on the commit?
August 12th,
August
2018.
2018. That's
So
interesting. So maybe
when it was actually assigned, when that CVE was actually assigned. The other one that is also drives me nuts is like, oh, it's a 2018, but the NVD says that it's still under analysis.
well, that NVD saying that for all new CVEs being issued.
But this isn't new. It was issued in 2018.
No, but it says
It was issued in 2018, and the patch was implemented in GitHub in 2018.
Yeah, this was new CVE received by NIST 6/17/2024 with references to the binarly and run zero.
So
blah,
why,
Is
if it's
this-
something
could
that
this- could this
existed,
be-
why was it getting a new CVE?
Could this be one of those that is like the curl one, when all of a sudden someone reported something and it didn't get a CVE, so they actually reported it to NVD and it got a CVE from the old whatever?
So it says in November of 2018, VDOO researchers disclosed a vulnerability related to the HTTP parsing code in light HTTP versions 1.4.5 and earlier. The security issue was fixed by lighthttpd as part of their 1.4.51 release in August 2018. Time of disclosure, researchers identified the primary impact to be denial of service using the released memory pointer, so use after free vulnerability. However, CVE was not obtained as part of the fix outlined above. Okay, so they fixed it, but didn't recognize it as a vulnerability. In April of 2024, Binarly discovered that the light HP vulnerability was still present in a number of projects, and what that's tying back to is AMI is using it in MegaRack in BMCs.
Yeah.
The lack of a CVID rendered the security fix invisible to projects that utilize. Oh, I see. So no one updated because they fixed it in 2018, but it didn't say it was a security vulnerability. So if you're maintaining light HTTPD, you're like, oh, I'm not going to update it. If I embedded it in my project or in my BMC or whatever, like I'm not going to update it because it wasn't a security vulnerability.
Yep. There's no CVE associated.
Right. Different set of attacks that can leave memory sensor.
But
The
your
binary also
original
documented-
question was, should you go out and fix it? I'm hearing a resounding yes.
Yeah. I mean, arguably, if you're using light HTTPD that is 6 years old, yep.
Yeah, because what else could be in there?
Yep.
Probably quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a disaster.
Probably OpenSSH.
So because it was just reported, but it was 6 years old, is it an O day?
Yeah, but so what I heard is it was fixed in 2018.
It was reported to light HTTPD and fixed by light HTTPD in 2018. Yes, but did not have a CV associated with it.
So basically, they backported the CVE to when they fixed it.
I see.
Yep.
Which is still like super confusing. It goes back to our earlier points of like don't do that.
Right.
Yeah. I understand why they did it, but I agree. If it came out, it should be, if it came out this year, it should be marked as such, and then in the description reference back to the commit in 2018 or something.
I mean, the tracking of these things isn't great. Like, what if they did issue a CVE and it had a really low CVSS score, but then researchers came along and were like, well, that use after free now is totally exploitable. Now you got to go update the CVSS score and hope that permeates out. Like, how do you make a big deal about that? Well, I mean, what if you already have a scan finding that found that vulnerability before the score was updated and it's a CVSS of 5, and you're like, oh, it's good, but that score is not going to get updated until you scan again.
Yep.
Which I guess is I'm advocating for constant scanning.
Or unless you have,
I think we used to call it continuous monitoring. Jeff.
Well, unless you have a tool that when the scan is complete, it continually recorrelates the findings to new scoring.
I don't know if the VM platforms do that. To my knowledge, they did not back in the day.
Well,
In fact, I never had conversations about that.
Some of your supply chain stuff might.
Right.
Finite state.
To answer your earlier question, though, Paul, about how often
it's a great point, though. That I mean, it's somewhat self-serving, but that aside, that's a valid and useful feature.
Yep.
You'd asked a question a while ago about how often do companies scan, and you're not sure how often they do it. I mean, the clients that I work with, it's a requirement for PCI, but the requirement is to produce once a quarter externally a passing scan. And then internally, it's also a quarterly requirement. Most of the companies I deal with these days, internally, they're scanning weekly because of the nature of how long it takes to fix some of the vulnerabilities and so on and so forth. And you're allowed to, in PCI, demonstrate a track record. And, it's difficult to get a clean scan at any point because there's always new stuff popping up. But if you can demonstrate that within 30 days or whatever of a scan discovery, a scan finding, you're dealing with it, even though you never get a clean scan, that's considered meeting the scanning requirement.
I'd almost be skeptical if I ever saw if I get a clean scan, I'm like, What went wrong? I used the wrong scan profile. The system went offline while I was
Right.
scanning it. Like something happened to the network switch in between me and the scan target while I was scanning. Like all those things go through my mind
Sure.
because you should really never have a clean scan. It's not about getting a clean scan, right? To your point, Jeff, I think it's more about demonstrating and executing on a process for continually remediating things.
Right.
And again, I mean, you know, to the person's point who was commenting about our discussion that I believe was 2 weeks ago, yeah, I mean, you're never going to have a clean thing, and not everyone has the resources to go, let's go fix everything
Right.
all the time, right? Everyone has a risk profile, some kind of tolerance to that, and a limited set of resources that force us all to prioritize these things.
Right. Now, a question I wanted to ask you, Paul, they're somewhat related, and it is a PCI thing. PCI is now requiring in version 4 the internal scans, and this is best practice. You get a year to figure it out. Doing authenticated scans, and I'm like, you know,
is this in 4?
this
The
is
thing
this
I
is in
now that you say
4.0.
that, Jeff, is there a 4.0.1?
Yes, there's a 4.0.1 that just was released. Gosh, a couple weeks ago, sometime in June, I
I
think.
thought I added a story. That for somehow got dropped because I did. Now I remember seeing someone that was writing something about the changes. So now I'm going to ask you, Jeff. What are, before you ask me the question, I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
4.0.1, does that introduce? What does that introduce? What does that do?
It's mostly errata. You know, they had, as you can imagine, different authors to different sections of the rocks, and they were noticing a few issues and disagreements and terminology things. So it's mostly a cleanup thing.
Sure.
I mean, it was released 2-3 weeks ago, and we as QSAs were scratching our head. Well, when's it effective? Apparently, it's effective right away. There is no grace period. I mean, they're not introducing any new requirements. They're just changing the wording on a few things and trying to make sure that everything is consistent in terms of terminology. That's the biggest change in 4.0.1. So it's a minor modification. But of course, you know, it makes everybody have to update things and look at the new version 4.0.1 instead of 4.0. Minor changes. I have not tripped over anything that's like, whoa, that's different. I'm not saying that it's not out there, but I tend to not see the glaring changes until I'm actually doing an assessment and reading the requirement and trying to apply it to a client. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, it says this. That's a little bit different. Let's see how that applies to you. But it's mostly just correcting some inconsistencies they had in some of their wording and verbiage.
And sorry, before I move on to hacking people's grills, you had a question for me?
Well, yeah. So in version 4, you're now required, and it'll be fully effective next April, to all your internal vulnerability scans will have to be authenticated. And of course, that means you have to do some sort of, you're allowed to use agents if you're using agents. But it means having some sort of, for all intents and purposes, administrative level access to the device so you can log in. And, you know, different scan technologies do that differently. But I'm kind of curious about your thoughts, you know, since you deal so much in embedded and IoT and appliances and things like that, things that are in your environment that you don't typically necessarily have a login to, but it's on your system and you got to, you know, it's on your network, so you got to include it in the scans. I mean, there's exceptions if you can't log into it, they allow for that. But any thoughts on what's the best practice approach to scanning IoT devices, appliances, things that you don't ordinarily have logins to necessarily?
Yeah, it's from everything that I've researched and discussed with folks, it's basically a complete shit show right now. Right? There's actually
that should be the name of this episode. Basically a shit show.
Yeah, basically a shit show. Like there's very few platforms that give you great visibility into authenticating to the device
Basically.
and being able to pull information about the software.
Right.
I think a better space is the configuration, right? Doing configuration management. Easier to pull the configuration files than it is to get on the underlying operating system and get a list of the software that's installed and then determine if it's up to date or not. Then there's even a smaller amount of ways in which to actually pull and or validate the firmware on a particular device
Right.
and compare that to a known good standard. Now it does exist. We at Eclipsium support it where we can, but we also advocate for more transparency. I'd love to tell you that I can log into your appliance. I can check to see if there's any known threats on there. I can check to see if, like, is your firmware good? Has it been tampered with? Can I compare it to a known good sample? Can I pull the firmware off of your device and then go like reverse engineer it on the fly, which is a system that we have that found some vulnerabilities recently, and go tell you if you got vulnerabilities on there, known or unknown, right?
Mhm.
That's a thing we want to provide, but there are a lot of barriers to that both us at Eclipsium we struggle with, but also VM and patch management as well,
Mm.
right? They're all kind of like, can I use an API? Can I SSH into it? Like, how can I get to that device to gain more visibility? And it's just not there for the most part. It's not there. Some vendors are more transparent than others in different areas too, right? So
Well, I just remember when we were both at Tenable, which is getting to be a long time ago at this point, and we were just rolling out agents. Renault was adamant about not giving the full power of Nessus to the agents because his contention was, in the wrong hands, Nessus is a cyber weapon. And so the agents, at least in the early days, and we're going back, 8 years, 2014, 2015, when they were starting to roll them out. It was very much more of a configuration checker than an actual vulnerability scan, meaning
yeah,
you
and
would
I
you
you
would get
know I just
findings on the agent that you
right.
wouldn't get vulnerabilities that you would get from the scan, because it wasn't looking for them. It was a different set of signatures, a different set of policies, and it really wasn't looking for all the things that you would get from an external
Yeah, and I disagreed. I
scan.
disagreed with Renault back then, and I still would disagree with him today
Me too.
because I think if an attacker wanted to bring their own kind of scanner,
Mhm.
um, they could, but in whether they're using something internal to the system or living off the land or bringing their own scanner, in either case, if that's not sending off all kinds of alerts that something like randomly on the network just started scanning everything,
Mhm.
then you've got all their problems. Like, you should be able to detect that behavior when something is scanning in that way. And organizations do that today, even with an Active Directory. If someone's trying to enumerate everything in Active Directory,
Mhm.
there should be all kinds of alerts going off and doing that. They can live off the land or they can bring their own. It doesn't really matter.
Right.
I think the benefits far outweigh the negative consequences, right? In that I like to enable things to be able to go scan their peers. I mean, also you should be configuring the Windows firewall to do that kind of stuff,
Right.
right? I mean, also it's kind of a moot point with everyone working from home too. Like, you could scan their local network. That brings up all kinds of other issues of permission and whatnot. But most people work from home now anyway, so the landscape has changed.
Right.
But still, I would just advocate for scanning on the local systems, right? Not just limiting it to a local thing.
All right.
So, Traeger grills. I have a Traeger grill. I've had it for quite some time, and
Now I have a no
Yeah.
wait.
Now we all have a
you
Traeger
all have a
grill.
Traeger
Yeah.
grill,
Yeah.
but you also need my Traeger grill, like UUID, which you have to either sniff off the network when I do the initial handshake, or you have to be in physical proximity of my grill to be able to take a picture of the sticker on the side that I've long since removed. Unless it lives somewhere else inside the grill, I don't know if you can get that from the menus.
Hey, dude, what are you doing this weekend? I'm going to bring over some burgers and.
Yeah, right. We were joking about
Right?
this. We were totally joking about this at work. Like, how hard is it to get the grill? Like, oh, it's a nice grill. Can I take some pictures of it? Like, I think about
Man,
getting
what's
the
the
same
what's
one,
the,
right?
What's the model on that? Where's the sticker that has the model number?
If you're gonna go through that much like great lengths to hack my grill, like have at it. Totally fine. I'm just gonna take my meat and I'm gonna put it in something else. My other grill that you build fire in is where I'm gonna
really
put
glad you clarified that.
Yes.
Because that could have gotten awkward real fast.
Because I mean, the easy bake oven is nice. I like the easy. We call the Traeger the easy bake oven because it is, and it's great. It's great. And I tell you what, I think you'd be hard pressed to determine the difference in the barbecue between a Traeger grill and something else. Bill, you live in Kansas City.
That's
Barbecue's like a big thing
That's
out there.
true.
Like, do you could if I
It
gave you
was
like
a
a
free
blind taste
straight
test,
until it came to the grilling. He's probably
right?
not allowed.
Or the barbecue sauce. You don't want to bring your Carolina or Tennessee barbecue sauce to
that's
Kansas
true.
City. They'll
That
throw
is-
it at you.
That is correct.
Because I have my Kansas City barbecue recipe and I've got my like Tennessee kind of Carolina barbecue recipe
yeah.
for those that like it's very
the
it's kind of
second
like
is the second tier friends. Yeah, I get it.
yeah, like Linux versus Windows versus Mac, man, is like barbecue sauce. You know what I mean?
Oh man, so I'm like the Mac guy with the mustard-based sauce, right?
I do both recipes call for mustard. I want to say so. I got my Tennessee recipe from Dr. Douglas from Tennessee.
Georgia's the
And
mustard.
I got my Kansas City one from a great website called Amazing Ribs. I'd be curious for you to try my barbecue sauce, Bill, and see what you thought.
I'll give it a
I'm
shot.
pretty proud of it.
I'll come up and take some pictures of your grill.
And come up and take some pictures of my grill.
And
So-
by grill, he doesn't mean your mouth.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. Your Traeger.
So tell us about what happened with Traeger.
Well, so I mean, with that information, you can kind of fool the API. You can get access to the grill. So the Traeger grills install the firmware updates automatically, which means the grills connect to the internet, and they do that automatically. And the grills have a 48-bit identifier that must be known to the attacker for the exploit to work. So that's what I was talking about, and it can be captured. There's an echo happening right now, which is really
That's a weird.
Something just
messing.
happened to me.
Something just happened.
Are the lights still
I'm back.
flashing?
Somehow it flipped over to my speakers out of my headset. I don't know how.
So, but I think this is
Riverside.
this is a manipulation on the API side. So, like poor authentication with the API with that identifier.
Yep.
You can then send commands to the grill, and this is the API. There was more to it than that, but I think the big kind of hack was
API authorization. failures.
API.
Yep.
Right.
And I love that when Bishop Fox is doing the research here, that they've got, it looks like
Tofu.
they've got tofu, and I'm like, oh, it looks like they've got this grill in the middle of nowhere. No, it's on a balcony somewhere.
They totally had a grill, and they were like, we're gonna basically smoke some tofu, and we're gonna mess it up remotely, like through the API.
I mean, they had it messed up by the grilling of the smoking the tofu.
Right.
Right.
Well, I mean, you don't want to mess up a brisket's expensive, man. You don't want to mess with that.
Yeah, put a pork butt on there. It's probably cheap, and even if you ruin it, it's still good.
There was another post that kind of called out a header without appropriate authentication or authorization.
Which is it?
Traeger?
Yeah, on
That's
the
two
Traeger,
different
there's
things, Paul.
well, I think both.
Okay.
So I think it allowed anyone access and then didn't differentiate between any kind of different levels of access, just like the header was the access kind of thing.
And just for those peons that still use charcoal grills, what can you control as a feature of a Traeger grill? I'm assuming you have like an app on your phone, and what?
Yeah, you got an app on your phone. You can control the temperature. You can shut it down.
Okay.
If you use the built-in temperature probe, you can also monitor that as well.
Okay. So it's mostly going online so you can monitor temperatures.
Right.
And set temperature.
Okay.
And set temperature.
Okay.
Right.
Makes sense.
Oh, Bill's on mute.
There we go. Let's try this again. So what I really liked about this article, and I just want to call out Bishop Fox. They've been doing a really good job lately in their articles. But one of the things that I really liked about this was they walked through the process of attacking an IoT device. Really, and one of the things that was really interesting to me was how they used MQTT protocol to discover the device and start to send authenticated yet not attached commands to the device. If you're interested in hacking, getting
Read these
started,
2 articles.
yeah,
Yep.
read them. This is a great because it's not magic, right? And a lot of devices work in this exact same way, right? So
Totally.
and and just also it's ESP32 attached on there, and so OTA firmware upgrades. It was a very, very well written article. Even though honestly, is anybody going to be hacking anybody's Traeger? Nah, maybe nah, but
I like
Well,
these if in case I need to hack my own Traeger.
right.
And hack by I mean like something's gone wrong and I need to figure out how to fix it,
Unbrick it.
kind of thing. Yeah, unbrick it
Or
or
if they
whatever.
release open source firmware for your Traeger.
So
Right.
is there a
Wait,
CVE
yeah.
associated with
That's
this?
what I was going to ask too, Jeff. Like, does Traeger have a CVE?
Actually, they did.
Interesting.
Because
they?
well, because they were in the first article you had with the API stuff. Yeah,
Right.
they vulnerability details, a CVSS score, right?
Well, it's CVSS
Oh,
score,
yeah.
but no CVE.
No, yeah, there's a CWE, but not a CV.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Like, do you think Traeger has a security team that reviewed that alert? Like
Maybe.
Maybe. How much of it was just outsourced, right?
Yeah.
It's an ESP32 on the Traeger.
Mm-hmm.
ESP32
So now-
S3 room.
Yeah, which I have some of those
Me too.
in addition to the one in my Traeger.
So do we need a G bomb?
Now I'm waiting for I want to see open source
dude,
firmware
you-
for my Traeger.
You could
Yeah.
put Marauder on that.
Oh my god, it's hilarious. See me pulling up at DEF CON with my Traeger. Like, oh,
I got some,
I'll just,
I got some smoked meats and your Wi-Fi. Thank you.
I'm running an evil AP attack right now on my Traeger, and I'm cooking a brisket all at the same time.
Yeah. So Traegers get
Great.
banned in Canada.
Right, can't have a Traeger. Gotta use my Traeger to steal your car, okay?
Jeez, that'd be awesome. You could load my Traeger into the trunk of your Tesla because I just stole it from the Traeger.
Oh boy.
Yes.
So threat actors are still going after D-Link routers. This one's kind of interesting
Is
because
that Trevor?
there was a slight variation on the
Trevor.
attack. So hi, Trevor. The initial vulnerability and associated exploit was like, oh well, you can get the username and password of a D-Link device by manipulating basically a post request with this body to this CGI script. And what Gray Noise figured out was that by modifying this, you could get the not just one user. I don't know which user came in the original attack, but they modify the attack so you get all usernames and
Oh,
passwords
Jesus.
dumped in clear text.
I love that the file names included in this thing is hackers are exploiting the flaw by sending a malicious post request to the hedwig.cgi to access sensitive configurations in the fatlady.php file.
I don't know how they come up with these things, man. Yeah.
There's still fat files out there?
Well,
yeah.
this device
PHP.
is this device is end of life. It is PHP, and it'll just add to the list of IoT botnets.
So
Yeah,
is this the same device that we talked about a couple weeks ago? Because I swear I remember you saying, Paul, I remember you saying like this thing's gonna get
dude,
attacked.
it's like every week.
Yeah.
It's like every week. I don't know if it's the same device or different, but it's like every week. It what it seems like to me, Bill, is that if you go to D-Link's website and you look at all the routers that they've end of lifed, and you go download all that firmware, and you just go start looking for vulnerabilities, you know they're not going to fix it, so I can just add it to my arsenal, right? I'm not sure why folks are like publicizing it, because I would think they would just totally keep it to themselves, because like who's going to know, right? Like, and then the company's not even going to fix it, so
Yeah.
or even make an announcement about it. So if I'm attackers, I
Well,
would
you're
just
answering your question, Paul.
particularly
If they're not going to fix it, who cares whether it's public or not publicized?
This is true. And then users aren't going to do anything about it because these are home routers that
Mhm.
are people that don't listen to this show. Right?
So I'm
And if you do, and you know people that have D-Link routers, like, get rid of them. I would. So what? One of the things, God, like, I need to clone myself. I have so many projects that I want to work on. Because what I was thinking
Okay,
about
uh-huh.
in this context was, you've got all these, let's see, D-Link, Netgear, to a certain extent, Linksys, but not so much lately. Hackers seem to be really going after D-Link and Netgear.
Yep.
And I'm like, for whatever you pay for the latest router or in that price range, how could you go build a Raspberry Pi that would do the exact same thing? And how do you build a Raspberry Pi that handles a decent amount of bandwidth, gives you a Wi-Fi access point, all in kind of one, and uses open source firmware like OpenWRT is supported on those platforms, that's kept up to date, right? And they're not going to like end of life it anytime soon. Like if you bought a Raspberry Pi 4, OpenWRT is going to probably support that platform for a really long time, right? And not end of life it. And if you can have something that's buildable and achievable. And I started looking, then you go start Google searching, and good Lord, you find like 8 million different projects, right? That can do it. So you can totally do it. But it requires some add-ons for your Raspberry Pi, because obviously you need not one Ethernet, you need two Ethernets. So now you're talking about a dongle.
So I will tell you the exact way to do this. Give it a year.
Go buy Ubiquity.
Nope, and buy Linksys.
Give it a
Because
year.
Linksys is moving all of their products to run OpenWrt from the factory by the end of 2025 and going fully open source.
Interesting. So they don't want to deal with they don't want the bad rep. Did they realize that? Are they feeling that? Like, are they listening to the show? And like, the Security Weekly people, they're bashing Netgear and D-Link for end of lifing stuff. So you know what? We're just going to switch to an open firmware model. And so as long as the community wants to support firmware for it, they can. How are they getting around the proprietary driver issue, I wonder?
Great question.
Because a lot of these have Broadcom
binary blobs.
binary
Can we
blobs
shift?
on them.
Can we shift gears and move on? I'm curious about.
Are we boring you, Jeff? I'm sorry. Are we
no,
boring
I'm
you with
just.
our router
It's not PCI.
conversation? It's not PCI compliant conversation.
I mean, we're talking about grills and how does that impact my clients? It doesn't.
No, we're actually talking.
Well, we moved off
grills and we started talking about Wi-Fi routers.
But you know, Larry's story number 3: uncovering secrets of Logitech M185's dongle. My first impression was
I wanted to hear about your dongle.
Who's still using dongles? So, Larry,
I do.
Enlighten us.
I do.
Yep. So
I do.
yeah, I'd be surprised. So this one was
Not saying you have a dongle.
Fun.
I'm saying are you still using it?
I just want to, but I want to preface this with the story we covered a couple of months ago, where pen testers went into a physical facility, scanned everything, all the the airspace for dongles for mice and keyboards that are vulnerable to mouse jacking. 2016 Black Hat presentation, mouse jacking, right? So 8 years ago, found at least one and was able to successfully deploy a Metasploit payload over basically like bad USB, but over
Wi-Fi,
over the
wireless,
over the RF, wireless or RF,
That's
right?
cool. Yep.
And so my to your first comment on this story, Jeff, was like, who's still using dongles? I've seen it, right? Like there's still.
Well,
also the other story I have is I had this totally illegal device. It was a cell phone jammer that years ago I ordered from, I think, AliExpress, and we brought it here to the studio, and I turned it on, and I was like,
you mean it may have gotten turned on by some
someone else turned it on.
Don't know who,
and I don't know who it was, and then we're like, well, everything's fine,
except for the keyboard.
This thing's except
engineer.
for the keyboards and or mice in the AV. So this is still, I think, valid attack. So Larry, I want to hear about your dongle.
No, well, wasn't my dongle, but like, so laptop mouse, there's still stuff out there, in the wild that's either older or in some stuff relatively new that uses non-Bluetooth related technology. Because there are folks out there that have devices that don't like Bluetooth or don't have
So
stuff.
that's not true. So I am a Logitech dongle user, and the reason why I use it is because I have 3 computers on my desktop. I have a Mac, a Linux, and a Windows box, and I can plug the dongles into each of them and just click a button and control each one of those computers, right?
Yep.
Uh,
Can you send me? Can you send me exactly what you're using for that at some point, Bill? Because I need one of those.
yeah, just go to Logitech's site. Like I'm using the
It's the whatever the yeah
MX370 or something,
yeah. But
like
so do
All right.
you need to purchase the multiple? I just point of clarification. Do you need to purchase the multiple dongles
Mhm.
or
Yeah, but
okay?
they're cheap, and
Mhm.
it is so like I don't know if anybody wants to look at my disgusting keyboard, but you see those white keys, the white keys right
It
there.
is yeah. It is pretty gross. Yeah,
You
you can
just
switch between computers, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
just click, and I'm on another computer, and
right.
it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect.
Yep. And
Anyway,
I
so
Okay.
use a
now,
Logitech presentation remote, and it has the dongle because, quite honestly, it
it's
is
just a mouse and or keyboard. It's a HID device,
and
right?
it actually works when I got it first. It actually worked better with the dongle than it did with the Bluetooth. So there we go.
So I
So
want,
the
We
fast
we love our dongles, Jeff.
yeah.
yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Well, before,
Ah, that was some strong cognac.
well, I mean, back in the day, a dongle, I
Yeah.
think, had a different meaning than.
I
I
guess
mean,
I should throw in here. I
the
use
picture in the
dongles on every
article is the
machine.
mouse and that little thing
Just
you
so you know,
stick
I
into
do
the
use.
USB port, which I've got one in
Yeah.
my
Yep.
laptop right now. I don't have my mouse with me, but I don't think of that as a dongle. But maybe the
What do you think it is?
definitions have changed. But dongle back
Yeah,
in
so
the
this is
day had some sort of cryptanalytic element, and there were you had to,
Like a licensing type of
yeah,
thing.
you had to
mhm,
have the
like a
dongle.
hardware key. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean
Mhm.
Is that a hard dongle?
that's a hard dongle.
And then when you emulated those in software, it was a software
So
key.
what is the definition of dongle? Anything that plugs into a
Anything that
port
plugs in.
that
The end.
attaches something
Yeah.
remotely, I guess.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I mean,
Now that we got all
I
that out of the
use
way,
dongles too, if that's the definition. But I remember using.
I think we're going for like most times we've used the word dongle in any given
I
episode,
think
which
so.
for this episode is par
Right.
for the course.
Yeah.
But I had a war dialing package years ago called what was it called? Phone Sweep. It was a paid version. Becky Bass had a
Is
company that
part yeah.
produced
This
it,
is
and the dongle was something that you couldn't use the war dialer unless you plugged in the dongle, because that was where
Mhm.
the
Yes,
keys
Phone
yeah,
were.
yeah, it's
sweep.
like a
I remember
licensing.
that.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
remember
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's
That
like
to me
using
is what a
AutoCAD back in the
dongle is.
day.
So I'm
Like
sorry.
using AutoCAD back
So,
in the day. And
Larry,
you
what
plug
is
that thing
the?
into the parallel port.
You've got a Hackaday article that's talking about the Logitech M185.
Yep. So the part that has fallen into their hands is the actual article from the author from and yes zero or ND0
Mm-hmm.
on his analysis of said dongle.
Mhm.
I want to say the TC32 is a pretty common chipset. Oh no, it says a fairly obscure
Yeah.
Yep.
TC32 chipset. Interesting.
Yep. So
Hmm.
like do some analysis. Can we do keystroke injection? Can we do HID injection? Any of those
Mm-hmm.
types of things? So I need to get a copy of the firmware. And well, allegedly there's a proprietary protocol for this telling chipset to be able to dump the firmware, and it returned garbage. So he just started fuzzing HID commands, and sure enough, he ended up finding some USB HID exploits to do memory dump over USB,
Wow.
and stitch together a bunch of Python scripts to dump the firmware, byte at a time over USB. And turns out Ghidra has support for this chipset, so he was able to do some analysis of the firmware.
So I have a stupid
And there's a
question.
whole primer on mouse dongle hacking.
Yep.
I mean, I'm fascinated. Truly, I am, and I'm curious because I'm obviously stuck in the 1900s technology. but this little dongle that I have, I think it's a Logitech mouse that I have. What's the communication protocol that's being used for the?
It's a great
Magic.
question. Depends
Magic.
on it depends on what dongle it is and what manufacturer and what version.
Okay. What are the
So,
what are the
or what
what
product.
are the broad categories, possibilities? What are the common? Is it RFID? Is it
gosh.
Bluetooth? Is it what
Probably
proprietary?
neither. It's most
It
likely
is.
some proprietary.
There are some that do some of the Logitech stuff. The newer stuff will also support Bluetooth.
Yep.
It's definitely not RFID, but there are some of them use most use 2.4 gigahertz frequencies,
Yep.
but it's not 802.11.
Correct. Yeah, there's some NRF LO1s, NRF 24 LO1s that had their own proprietary protocol from Nordic. I suspect this Telink
Right.
one has its own proprietary protocol as well.
So, Paul, have you ever
pointed for the most part?
Have you ever pointed any of your flippers, Paul, at any of your mouse dongles and other dongles?
Flippers do support mouse jacking, and
Okay.
there are add-ons for the flipper that I do have
Okay.
that will enable 2.4 gigahertz and allow you to transmit and receive on those frequencies to interact with what is it called? Is it an NRF? It's an NRF board.
It's probably
NRF.
a Nordic NRF LO1.
Yeah.
Yep. And or the CC 1101.
Will that go up to?
No, that one does 900 megahertz.
Correct. Some of them are 900 megahertz.
So that's like
as well.
that's
right.
like RF cat
type
stuff. So,
and I assume the dongle's getting power from
USB.
the device.
USB.
Okay. Cool. I'm fascinated. All right, talk to us more about the dongle story.
I mean, I think we covered. We
We're
covered
good?
it.
Okay.
Yeah, covered it. So it didn't necessarily have a lot of exploit development going on here. It really turned into hey, I wanted to get this firmware so I could do some analysis, and it turned into the adventure of doing the actual firmware dumping itself, and then it didn't publish a lot on the analysis side of the firmware portion. So it was more about the adventure than the end result, I think.
Right.
And the friends we made along the way.
Yes. Yep.
Larry, I was curious about your long range hacking article.
Oh, yeah. So this one was interesting, and I went back and forth with this. So this one was from. Oh, was this the one that I thought it was?
For Laura.
Yeah. Yes, the Laura one, and I didn't think it was from War Cloud Industries that I had it.
It was a guest post.
Yeah, from Dan Dealerly. And I thought that was from what's John Strand's company there?
Black Hills.
I thought he was from Black Hills, but so
Black Hills just ran a series on the LoRa C2.
Effectively the same thing. It was that stuff. Effectively, the long distance hacking here was kind of all over the place from what I was getting here, and that's the long range stuff. Effectively took two LoRa enabled devices, and if it wasn't necessarily this article that I was thinking of, took two long range LoRa devices, connected one to their PC, connected it to the other LoRa device as an endpoint, and then plugged that one into a computer or dropped it off into someone else's network in their environment. So instead of having to be present to hack Wi-Fi networks and so forth, they were able to trigger commands to do scanning and exploitation on a remote device really far away via LoRa. So instead of having a USB cable connecting to my Wi-Fi adapter, I just enabled that Wi-Fi adapter over another protocol, in this case LoRa, which was many miles of non-line of sight type of stuff. So I thought it was a pretty neat application. The stuff that I was reading, it was really kind of back and forth. It was a series of 4 articles, and I think that was over at Black Hills. And it was like back and forth, and I found it really hard to follow in the first stuff, and it was like, oh hey, yeah, we're gonna go configure all this stuff on this device, and then that device never gets mentioned again in the remainder of the 3 other parts of the article. I'm like, well, why did we do this stuff? And it was like, it was kind of didn't know what that was all about. And I think there was a lot of going back and forth between a Raspberry Pi and a Pico and a Nano Pi W with wild abandon, and they were all referring to the same device.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I am so confused here. And maybe that was kind of the point.
So speaking of Black Hills, I didn't put this in the stories, but I watched a webcast put on by Jack Hyland, who works for Black Hills. He did a talk on mail failed. Have you guys seen mail fail yet?
No.
So if you go to the address m.ail.fail, so mail failed m.ail.fail. He
Totally not going there, because when you tell me to go to websites,
well, I'm telling you it's safe, but
learn-
do your own research. But I'm telling you,
you
it's
always
safe.
say that.
Yeah.
You're like, Paul, it's totally safe.
Listen, yeah, like
And then
privately,
there's
not
disgusting things on my
Yeah,
screen, and then
everyone
scarred
go to
for
my
life and in
website.
counseling.
Everyone go to my website. Mail fails. I'm just kidding. So it's Jack's. But so what Jack did is I'm sure everybody's probably in the same boat. Like everybody here understands SPF and DKIM, right?
Totally.
No,
Yes.
right? No,
No.
like no. And so what he did is he went through at a very technical level how SPF works, how DKIM works, and how you can bypass each one of them. Like and it was incredible. And then he released this tool, MailFail, which is a Firefox plugin that if you were to go to any website, click on it, it then queries all the MX records and everything, and will tell you how if the domain is spoofable and how to do it. And it is absolutely incredible.
Oh.
If you have ever wanted to know really how SPF and DKIM works, it's only an hour long, and he did such an amazing job of conveying, a somewhat obscure, protocol or whatever we call it, but walking away, it was definitely worth the watch. And this tool is
Hey,
is
butthole,
absolutely
it's
incredible.
not too
So,
late
wait.
to add a link to the show notes, and
Hey, I'm no longer butthole.
make a story.
No, wait. If I remember this correctly, with the help of Chat GPT, SPF prevents other people from sending email from your domain, right? Spoofing.
Yeah.
And DKIM ensures message integrity.
You should just go watch it. So it's
Go watch it.
Yeah.
Right?
If only,
It's hard
if
to
only we
distill it
had the
down.
link.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'll go put it in there. And
Thank
by
you.
the way, I'm no longer butthole. I've changed my name.
Now you're donghole.
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 Dongle.
Change my name.
Dongle.
Donghole.
Yeah.
Donghole.
Yeah.
Dongle,
But
dongle.
so it's definitely worth the watch. If you just
Dongle.
Google mail fail, you'll find it.
Dongles.
But so anyway, that was a great job, Jack. That's my shout out. I give one submission this today.
We have a few more minutes. Do we want to talk about bootloaders, or do we want to talk about local privilege escalation in Cisco NX-OS, or both?
I wanted to talk
Which one
about my
first?
story number 8.
Or
Larry.
third
Go.
option. Okay. In some order, those are the next 3 things we will talk about.
Story number 8. Llama.ttf. It's an AI LLM in a font.
Man, I gotta tell you, I tried reading this story and I think my brain exploded. I don't understand.
So effectively, what the deal is here is that the author Soren Jorgensen.
Soren. That's a Star Trek reference.
Was able to put a 15 meg LLM into a valid TrueType font. And through using some TrueType font extension, the HarfBuzz font extension library, which is used for making custom fonts for like Persian and so forth, So extending the TrueType font by sending the TrueType font to this other engine to be rendered. This extension allowed effectively code within a TrueType font to be executed.
Wow.
So when you set some text to this font specifically and type the exclamation point, the font extension library would go to the exclamation point, find the code, and execute the code. And the code was an LLM, and it would output not only change some characters around, but it would also run some creation of text,
Wow.
like poetry and that type of stuff.
Can
One
you
like that.
control what text is produced?
That's the
Like
so in this particular case,
commands,
this LLM, the output was the output of Tiny Stories LLM, so it generates tiny
Right.
stories for you. But yes, you could in fact create your own font as long as the HarfBuzz font extension library was installed to execute any LLM. I find this also terrifying is that it doesn't have to run an LLM.
I mean,
It could ride in Metasploit payloads.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds kind of sort of like SQL injection.
So now all we got it. Well, I guess I guess fonts have been problems in the past. Now we have another font problem. Hey, install my font.
You mean in addition to Comic Sans, we have font problems?
Time to change your name to Font Hole. Donghole.
Oh my god.
So HarfBuzz, the font extension library, allows fonts to contain WebAssembly code and runs it in a virtual machine at rendering time.
Oh.
It's a
So
feature.
So
It's a
do
feature.
I only have to install the font?
That's a great question. I think you probably need the HarfBuzz
Extension.
as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, I think you're
Crazy.
right.
My brain hurts now. Thanks, Tyler.
But it's saying with the exclamation points, whenever you put a bunch of
Yep.
exclamation points,
Because
it replaces
the
them with the
font
output of the
contain
Tiny
the font
Stories LLM
contains
locally in the font.
the
So
WebAssembly
I'm
code, which is then interpreted by HarfBuzz.
Wow.
What's an exclamation point, by the way?
Yeah.
You're talking about bang, right?
So
Yes.
are you ever seeing the output?
Yeah, but only the stuff right
Bang
at bang,
hole.
Jeff,
Is
not
that
the
like
stuff left of bang.
hashtag versus pound sign? All right, wait. I have questions.
Ampersand
Moving
versus
on. I have. I
Octothorpe.
want to do these next stories as questions.
All right.
So, have you ever seen a speculative execution vulnerability be exploited in the wild for some level of impact?
Define.
So we're talking
scene.
Spectre, Meltdown, Zenbleed,
Nope.
and all the other ones that are attacks on CPU, microcode, architectural issues that allow you to basically read data you're not supposed to.
Sounds like you're
largely.
trying to do your
You
job
mean,
through
have we
us,
seen-
your day job through
have
us.
we
Paul.
seen
No.
Have we seen
This
them
says that-
weaponized?
Yes, it exploited in the wild. Have you seen attackers using
We saw Heartbleed.
any of
right?
the vulnerabilities that we would put in the class of speculative execution? Because the new one is, I don't know if it has a name, but there's a new Intel speculative execution, indirect branch predictor, branch target buffer.
That's a lot of words.
Yeah, a lot of words. That basically Intel says modern processors and architecture prevents against attacks against this, and researchers are like, this is totally possible. Intel kind of dismissed it. Pathfinder was another recent one, and we've talked about in several episodes in the past few years newer variations on speculative, basically they all fall in the class of CPU bugs that deal with largely speculative execution, meaning branch prediction, meaning the processor is basically caching instructions to gain better performance. My question is, has anyone seen anything that's indicative of attackers using these vulnerabilities in the wild?
I have
Because
not.
I have not.
No.
I mean, there certain. I mean, now granted, we are obviously a limited audience, but we also hear lots of things. But there may be certain government agencies that have seen or have
Sure.
used them.
But then, like,
So
my next question is like, are we not seeing them because we're not looking, or are we not seeing them because they're not often exploited? Right? Maybe they are exploited, but it's very small pockets, very targeted, and very like kind of brief, like flashes in the pan. And if we're not equipped to monitor, like, how would you know if someone stole some
What
data
does it
via
look like?
some kind of speculative execution vulnerability, right?
Are all the monitoring
Anyway,
tools
Intel's
tuned to look for it?
disputing, right? And Intel is kind of disputing, like, this is not a big deal, and researchers are like, no, it's totally possible. And so that's the latest speculative execution kind of thing. So I think it's interesting that, like, part of me wants to see a day where these are being used, that we've kind of forced attackers to this level of attack. Or maybe we just need to get better at detecting them. So I would love the audience feedback on that, like if we've seen these in the wild. um how much do you folks rely on other people providing recursive DNS for you, like resolving queries? Like, do you take, like, if you, when you configure DNS for your systems at home or work or wherever, what's providing DNS to you? Like, is it Cloudflare? Is it Google? Or are you doing it on your own? Like, where do we fall in the spectrum of what's resolving names for us? Is it your own server or someone else's?
Someone else's.
Someone else.
100%.
Largely, it's someone else's, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it comes back to the fact we're lazy.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to do it ourselves. But Cloudflare's very popular 1.1.1.1 DNS service was disrupted by BGP hijacking and a route leak. Now, I'm not saying we can do any better. However, it kind of called into question my strategy for DNS. And I set up a local resolver, but I set up a forwarder to someone else's DNS,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like, they do a great job. So I should outsource to the Googles and the Cloudflares of the world, because they do a great job. And I'm not saying that just because this one incident they're not doing a great job, because they are.
Mhm.
But it's a trust issue for me.
Mhm.
and
And
you have trust issues.
I think we all have trust issues. Now I've got a big time trust issue with DNS. And I should have listened to Joff years ago on the show, where he's like, dude, you need to set up your own DNS servers. They need to go to the root DNS servers,
Mhm.
and you need to, like, control this is my coffee analogy, right? In secure, and so I relate coffee to security and your risk tolerance, if you will, right? So let's think about coffee. So there's two very extreme ends of the spectrum with coffee. One is you grow your own plants, like you take the seeds, you grow the coffee plant, you harvest the beans from that plant, you roast your own beans, you grind your own beans, you got some fancy coffee thing, whether it's a French press, whatever,
Mhm.
right? And you're really serious about coffee and do everything, right? From seed to cup of coffee, do everything
You
yourself.
locally source your artisanal water.
Artisanal water, like the whole thing, right? Purifying my own water. I've got my own water distiller, whatever it is. And then the opposite end of that spectrum is I go into the local convenience store, I go to the cooler, I open the door, and I pick up a pre-bottled, glass thing or can or whatever of coffee. And I just trust in that scenario that everything is fallen into line in my supply chain and in all the things. I'm gonna have a great experience, that I'm not gonna die from drinking this
That
coffee.
they washed all the civet cat poop off of the
And
civet
I've
cat poop
right,
coffee.
the
Yeah.
monkey poo or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And so I have to trust that process is not going to cause harm to me. Now, when we relate this to DNS, I think a lot of us are leaning towards more of the convenience store model,
Yep.
and
Totally.
less towards the growing. And growing your own coffee plant is extreme. Like, maybe I source my beans from, like, a natural organic place, and I grind the beans myself, or
Mhm.
there's a million different ways you can make coffee. But it's similar to how we make decisions in cybersecurity, right? And how we make decisions in our own businesses and environments. Like,
Right.
how much trust, how much ownership do I want to have? Ownership means responsibility, but it means I trust less people.
Mhm.
And that's exactly the case in DNS. I'm kind of calling into question, like, I want to own more of the process. in DNS. I want to run my own DNS servers, my own resolvers. I want to own more of that process. And yes, it's more work. Like growing the coffee plant and doing all that stuff, more work, but I can validate the process better myself than I can going to the convenience
But
store. And
what's the
Joff said
risk?
this on the show years ago. Go ahead, Jeff.
What's the risk analysis? What's the cost benefit analysis? You know,
Mhm.
How much are you willing to invest in growing your own?
See, I think that
Well,
the
and what
time
is the
factor,
time
Mandy,
factor?
in my
How
case
often?
is skewed because in several points in my career, I've had to admit that like I know DNS and I've managed DNS, and then they're like, "Oh, we got this DNS project, and now it's yours, Paul." And I'm like, "Shit, I need to like keep
to
my
shut
big
up.
mouth shut from now on because I'm tired of doing DNS projects." So I've got a lot of experience in DNS, so I'm like, I should use that and I should do more of my own DNS and not forward to someone else and trust the upstream. I want to be more in control of my environment, right? Now, for
I mean,
others,
like, well, I don't quite understand where this stops, Paul. Are you going to mine your own silicon and then build the chips for your DNS server?
right,
And
Yeah,
right, right. It can go to extremes, dude. Like,
yeah.
I want to build my own firmware. I want to,
Right.
Mhm.
build my own chip, or like
and,
it can
and,
go to
and then
extreme.
and then it
Well,
goes
but
and then
my
it goes
point:
the other way. Like then like do I run
do
it
I
on a
trust
Raspberry?
everyone?
Do I
Yeah,
run it on a Pi in my own network, or do I run it on
a cloud
a
provider,
cloud provider? At that point, why don't I just use Route 53? Oh
right?
wait,
Oh wait,
right. We just went full circle,
yeah.
right?
I think we're most of. I mean, so my analogy that I've given in talks is that most of us land in between, and we also kind of go to one extreme or the other. We should go to one extreme or the other, I should say, based on the criticality of that function in or service as it relates to the business, right? And factor in your resources as well.
Right.
Well, I mean,
That's where I think most people should fall. I'm not saying you should do, and we've all seen this, right? Like I know Linux people that want to run Gentoo and they want to do everything themselves. I'm like, that's great, but I'm also resource constrained, right?
You
It's not
know,
that I don't want to learn and I want to put in the work because that's not true, but I recognize like there's only one of me, and
so
I've got a lot of things that I want to do, that include like family and like having a life as well,
Mhm.
and that like that's a balance. But the hard part, I think, when we evaluate risk is what's most important to us that we really do want to put the time in to protect.
The problem is that so if you were to grow your own DNS server using your coffee analogy, which was a stretch by the way, but I'll give it to you.
Thanks,
Uh,
thanks, thanks for
uh,
giving me that
yeah.
one, Bill.
The
By
problem
the way, I
is
didn't need your approval for that
right.
because I thought it was a solid analogy.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. The problem isn't today, right? The problem is a year from now, right? And so like now you've got
Oh, I
this,
completely agree.
right?
Yes.
Like
Yeah, I
that's
know
the
where you're
big,
going to.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And now you've got this thing that you built and it hasn't been cared and fed and like
Dude, it's so true because we're
mhm,
like, I'm all hopped. I'm going to do my own DNS. I'm going to
mhm.
do it all myself. And then we're going to fast forward a year from now. We're all going to be sitting on the show and I'm be going, ah,
Yeah,
shit. I haven't looked at my DNS server in like 6 or 8 months.
And,
I was
and,
all
right.
excited about it before,
and
Yeah.
then we have this
but
term
now I've
called
neglected it and the
Yeah.
plant's dying.
and
Right?
now
That's
you
right.
have
Yes.
this
That's
and
right.
now you have this term called technical debt.
Yep.
Yep.
Hmm.
Oh, it's so
Mhm,
true. That is
mhm.
that is a trap you can fall
But
into.
how does your analogy
Yeah.
apply, Paul, to all the organizations out there that rely on private addressing? Don't they have to have an internal DNS server that maps all the
Yeah, it's
They,
called
private
they
it's
do.
addresses?
called
Yeah.
Microsoft Active Directory, and it does it
And I
all
do.
for you.
Right.
Well, no.
Well,
And
extend
so for like
extend
here
your
in the studio,
analogy to the internal.
for internal, I do that, right?
Mhm.
I have my own DNS server that I manage my own records on for here, like in the studio. But when I have to resolve something that's not in my internal
Mhm.
domain, I outsource that and I rely on some external. We call it a forwarder, right? A forwarded DNS server.
Right.
I rely on that, right? So I am maintaining my own server. I guess in that sense, it's a pretty easy step to go. I just want to maintain it, so I'm not relying on an external forwarder. And that's a pretty, from when I thought about this, I'm like, that's a pretty easy change, right? It's still going to cache it. It's just I'm going to go out to the root servers rather than someone else's
What would
forwarder.
Joff do? He would just go to the root servers?
He would go to the root server, right? And that's a pretty easy change, right?
WWJD.
Right.
What would Joff
What
do?
would
Yeah.
Joff
What
do?
would Joff do? What would
Yeah.
Joff do?
Okay.
Well, you should ask him what he does, not what would he do. What does he
Right.
like? What does he?
Right.
Mhm.
I mean, it'd be cool if we could get him back on the show and ask him what he does.
But also like, so the other thing that sparked this was there was a vulnerability in Pi-hole that was fixed. And Pi-hole is kind of like this automated script. I can spin up my own DNS server and I can apply rules to it, and I can download rules that I can filter content based on DNS. I can filter malicious websites out, and I still rely on the Pi-hole project to do that. And so I'm like, I don't know if I want to do Pi-hole. I don't know if I want to forward. I want to take more control of that. Is my point. And because supply chain vulnerability, right? Or like the Pi-hole thing, if I'm using Pi-hole, and Pi-hole has a vulnerability or has some other vulnerability component they use, I suffer from that. So I want to take more responsibility over
But then you're
really
likely going to
critical
use the same components that Pi-hole is already with, like bind and
and
all
then
that stuff.
and then I can update them faster than they can. But to Bill's point, I got to keep up with that, right? And that's we run these race conditions all the time.
Yep.
I think.
And this is also for the same reason why you pay someone else to hang up your Christmas lights, because ain't nobody got time for that. And I have.
This is true. Yes, it is right.
Yeah.
We got to make these, but the decisions have to be
Well,
smart.
that's what I was saying
right?
about the time
Like, they have
sink
to
on
be,
all of it. That's
I don't want to do this. I'm going to outsource it because this other thing that I want more control over for better security and reliability or whatever
Yep.
is more important than the thing I'm going to outsource.
I'm gonna
Because
out-
my Christmas lights get compromised or don't work, it's not the end of the world. But if DNS is borked or compromised or whatever, it's a bigger deal.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna outsource my DNS, but I'm gonna maintain control of my firewall.
Right.
I'm not gonna outsource my
Firewall, the whole
Yeah.
thing. Right. We need a new firewall here for the studio. We got a lot of decisions. Like, can I just go with what we have, which is old and outdated, but it works, right? Do you want to buy something new? Do you want to like just build a
something.
Linux thing and build everything from scratch and be
IP
control
tables
for everything?
I mean, that's not IP tables anymore, but
No.
There's like
You wait 1
half a
year
dozen.
for Linksys to release
To make
open
open
source.
work,
right? Well, to hell with that. Just build an x86 PC and put x86 OpenWord on it. Like,
All right. My next question is, why do we need bootloaders? Do we need a bootloader? What is the purpose of a bootloader?
Well, I mean, arguably, you need a bootloader, and I'd say this, and I only briefly skimmed the title of this article where someone was able to take Google Drive and use it as their drive.
Oh yeah, I was totally incorporating that. Like, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yep.
Was my comment to, I think, KF on Twitter, right? And it's very similar to the bootloader, and I've seen, working where I work, I've seen many articles on this and had discussions about it. Like, a bootloader is basically more attack surface is the problem. And the purpose of the bootloader is to give the kernel extra options and have some more capability and configuration. But that comes at a cost of more attack surface. We've seen when there's vulnerabilities in Grub, it can be a bad day. If there's vulnerabilities in the Windows bootloader, it's a bad day. And my kind of risk profiling of this is bootloader happens before your operating system loads. And I think one thing I've learned working at Eclipsium for the roughly 2 years is an attacker that can control code that is loading before the operating system can circumvent all operating system controls. So whatever you're putting in your operating system, your EDR, your operating system controls that live inside your kernel, Windows defenses, all that basically means nothing if an attacker gains control of a bootloader or earlier stage code. And so someone gave a presentation recently at a conference that was talking about, the title was "No More Bootloader, Please Just Use the Kernel Instead." And I've seen multiple in over the years, like, people advocating for this. It is less user friendly and configurable, but more secure in that you're reducing your attack surface, right? So they're basically like UEFI loads in Linux. If you want secure boot to work, you got to load shim, and then they're jumping over all the rest of the steps and just going right to loading the kernel, right? There's no grub, there's no other intermediary steps. It's basically what do they call that? Unified kernel, right? Everything's kind of baked into the kernel. They didn't use the RAMFS, and all that stuff is baked in the kernel. And they actually have a slide in this presentation, which is, you should go read it. It's awesome. What story number was that I had?
So we'll get rid of bootloaders, and
4.
then a year from now,
Yeah,
somebody
my
will figure out how to hack the kernel, and then we'll have kernel
4.
loader
It's story
issues.
Well,
4.
and that's fine, because this to me is the slide in here. I forget which slide number it is, but they have a slide in here that's like, look, this is traditionally how we load the operating system.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, a dozen steps.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, we do have the ability to do this basically in like 4 or 5 steps. And to me, that reduces the attack surface. Sure, it can still be attacked, to your point, Jeff. I completely agree.
Right.
But we're greatly reducing attack surface at this point.
My other question
I'm
is,
wondering,
how
like,
often does anybody reboot anything anymore?
well,
Realistically.
that's the thing too.
It occurs. It occurs.
It happens.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the answer to that question, Jeff.
I mean, it was a rhetorical question. I mean, I just got the the Windows patches for my laptop, and so I had to, I got the notice.
You had to reboot.
Got to reboot. But do I really have to reboot, or is that just the convenient way to do it? And is it attacking more endpoints, workstations, rather than servers?
I still think there's times where servers have to be rebooted.
There is, but
So I'm looking at the slides, and it looks like it's a slide 11, and they show that there's currently, with a bootloader for EUFI, there's 12 or 8 steps that
It's
is needed.
UEFI. I can't.
What did I say?
EUFI.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you did.
No, I didn't.
Eufy hole.
I say that term at least 24 times a day.
Well, okay. So with the direct boot, the EUFI, that one, is
Unified Extensible
yeah,
Firmware.
reduced to 4. Yeah. So
Yes, right.
Mm-hmm. That is interesting.
It's
scary. It's for some reason. It's
I know
scary.
it's scary. It's not new. Believe me, there's like tons of projects and blog posts and write-ups on, like, let's get rid of, we don't need the bootloader. Like, right from there's enough code in UEFI. Like, I want to call UEFI an operating system, but like technically it doesn't meet all the criteria, but it's like really close. There's enough functionality in there to be able to just load your kernel, right? We put in these intermediary steps to have, from what I've read, have extra configuration. Now, I'll give you examples of your configuration. If you've ever run a Linux system and gone, well, something's not working, or I want something to work differently. Oh, I need to go in my grub configuration and I need to add something, or I need to, go into my, back in the day, Lilo configuration, right? And add something that was to the bootloader to be able to tell the kernel to do something different, to configure something different. So I'm not sure how that translates exactly into some of the newer models. I think it does kind of reduce some of that functionality, or make it just different and or more difficult, perhaps. But yeah, I think it's really cool. And again, it's not new. Unified kernel images aren't new. I've seen a lot of advocacy for this, so I think it's interesting. I had one more thing on
Cool.
Cisco.
I just deleted my bootloader. I'm on
just
board.
Just delete it.
Yeah.
Dude, that is one of my most popular tweets ever, is a meme where you ask Windows, like, hey, can I remove Microsoft Edge? And Windows is like, yeah, no, I can't let you do that. And then the guy asks Linux, he's like, hey, can I delete my bootloader? He's like, yeah, sure, have at it.
Yeah.
Sure, it's fine. Totally fine. Like I've always said, you want to break a Linux system, just delete all the bootloaders, right? Like,
delete all those kernels, right?
Delete all the kernels and the bootloaders. You're totally fine. So the last thing was CISA adds Cisco NX-OS command injection bug to its known exploited vulnerabilities catalog. This particular vulnerability it's kind of like a privilege escalation, but sort of different, which is, most of us focus on remote code execution vulnerabilities, the CVSS, 9 and 10s that are out there get the higher scores, right? But what attackers go after is not just that. Attackers are going after local privilege escalation. And this is a case where in the wild, Chinese threat actors that they're calling Velvet Ant went after Cisco NX-OS devices, gained initial access, which in NX-OS gives you like the Cisco kind of command line interface to it. And then NX-OS is basically Linux underneath it. And what you can do in NX-OS is basically I don't know what to call it. It's not a privilege escalation, but it's like a flipping to the Linux operating system. Like you can gain access to the underlying Linux operating system. I'm pretty sure there's ways to do that legitimately. I think what threat actors figured out was there was a vulnerability that allowed them to, I don't want to say escalate privileges.
Sounds more like
but a
a
break.
like
I'm
break
sorry, it's a
shell.
breakout. A
Yeah.
breakout. Thank you, Bill.
Mm.
It's a breakout attack that they're doing to basically break out from the Cisco NX user interface. Even if you're like super highest privileges in NX-OS, there's still yet another privilege level if you can break out into the underlying Linux OS. That's what this vulnerability was about. That was observed in the wild, which is why CIS added to the KAV, which I think is pretty cool.
The end.
The end. That's all I had. This was fun.
That's fun.
The first hour was extremely. We put a lot of the entertainment in the first hour and a lot of the knowledge
And
in
then
the second hour.
we got scolded by Dad, and we had to like behave for the second half.
Yeah. And I had I share a wall with another home, and they had an electrical fire in the middle of this, so that's why I was back and
it's
forth.
just- I hope everything's okay, Mandy. I saw the
I
house.
haven't burned. I did not burn down. But
Hopefully
there
nothing's
are
on
fire
fire.
trucks and everything out front.
That's just
Sorry.
part. We're gonna. You know what we're gonna do?
Who needs a
glad
bootloader
everything's
when
okay,
your
Mandy.
house is burning to the ground?
Right.
The end.
We're gonna transition to the Iceman interview after this. It was, oh my god, it was so much fun. If you're into RFID hacking or you're just getting started, you're gonna love this interview.
yeah.
There's something in there for everyone. Even if you're just starting in this field and you're like, what does RFID hacking give folks? Like we talk about that too, like all the different in everyone's everyday lives. You are interacting with RFID in some capacity. If you're carrying a friggin' credit card in your wallet, you've got RFID technology on you, which I thought was just like an amazing thing. So enjoy the Iceman interview. Thank you, everyone.